Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to the Police and Crime Committee. This morning, the committee will be discussing matters concerning the resignation of the former Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick. Please would you make sure that your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. Can I now ask our clerk, Lauren, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. No apologies have been received today.
Thank you, Lauren. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interests to declare?
Noted.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of October 2022 to be signed by me as a correct record?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Can we note the ongoing actions arising from previous meetings?
Noted.
Thank you. And now we move on to our main item of business. On the 29th of September 2022, under the provisions of Section 35(5) of the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011, the committee agreed to require the attendance of the Mayor of London at this meeting, in his capacity as the occupant of MOPAC, to answer questions around his actions in relation to the resignation of the former Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick. So this morning I would like to welcome Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, an occupant of MOPAC, and Sir Thomas Winsor. Before we begin our questions, can the committee agree the purpose of this meeting, which is to put questions to invited guests on matters around the resignation of the former Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick, and to put questions to the Mayor of London around his actions in relation to the resignation of the former Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick. Are we all happy with that and agree? Thank you very much. Right, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start by asking you a few questions. You stated that Sir Thomas Windsor's investigation was clearly biased. What is the basis of that view?
Well, I think the reality is that what we've seen is the acting commissioner asked the then Home Secretary to commission a report asking Sir Tom to undertake the report. The view of me and others is that the process is flawed, the investigation is biased, ignored many facts. We all know, it's a matter of public record, Sir Tom's close association with the former commissioner. We all know Sir Tom's close association with former Home Secretaries. In Sir Tom's own words, he's given more weight to those of police officers than from others. And the conclusions of Sir Tom weren't a surprise to many.
Right, I've got to give Sir Tom an opportunity to answer those points. Sir Tom?
They're absurd. The idea that the facts have been ignored, over 115 pages, the facts have been gone into on a minute-by-minute detailed basis. They could not have been more painstakingly and thoroughly analysed. Unfortunately, the Mayor and others of his staff failed properly to engage with this investigation until a very late stage in the proceedings, and only after 9, as far as interviews were concerned, 9 requests for interviews, the first request having been made on the 7th of April. Finally, an interview was agreed to after 2 time extensions to the investigation on the 17th of August. So the idea that the facts have been ignored is absurd, particularly because at a late stage in the process, the Mayor's office provided me with detailed, factual material, which caused me to revise my report in a number of material respects, and that is reflected paragraph by paragraph in my report. So the idea that the facts have been ignored is just not sustainable. The process, the Mayor says the process is flawed. The process is not flawed. It is exactly in accordance with my terms of reference. And if the process were flawed, then the Mayor and MOPAC could easily have made that point before today. This investigation was supposed to take 6 weeks. It took 22 weeks predominantly because the Mayor and MOPAC failed properly to engage. The Mayor also says that I've given weight to police officer evidence over others. Well, that's not borne out by the report. I do say that how I have evaluated the evidence, credibility, sustainability, people's memories, but also the documentary evidence and many other factors. That is what investigators do, and that's what I did. The Mayor says that my close association with Cressida Dick is well known. Well, it's not well known to me, or indeed, I think, to her. In 12 years in policing, I think I have had one social occasion with Cressida Dick, and that is when she invited me for dinner at the very end of my term of office as Chief Inspector of Constabulary to say thank you for 12 years of service. It was a pleasant dinner. We didn't discuss this. There have been no other social occasions, and the idea that we're friends is just not sustainable. I'm also told that the Mayor also says I have close associations with former Home Secretaries. I also have close associations with leading members of the Labour Party, a party of which I was a member on and off for 30 years. Indeed, I became a member of the Labour Party 10 years before the Mayor was old enough to vote. My Labour Party mentors were Donald Dewar and John Smith and Claire Short. I was appointed as rail regulator and international rail regulator by John Prescott, who is hardly some soft-left New Labour apparatchik. So I was appointed Chief Inspector of Constabulary by Theresa May. So both extreme ends of the political spectrum. So the idea that I have political affections or allegiances is absurd.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, would you say that you did engage properly with Sir Tom Windsor's investigation from the outset?
We did. He was sent minutes of various meetings. He was sent emails. He was sent extensive written material. He was sent 30 pages of evidence. The Chief of my staff, the Deputy Mayor and myself met him for an hour and 45 minutes. And so we did cooperate fully with his review.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Can you put your microphone closer to you?
Sure.
Apologies.
Shall I say that again?
If you want to, yes, please. I think they're having problems hearing
Sure.
you. Thank you.
So during the course of his review, he was sent copious minutes of various meetings. Often, the only recollection of a meeting that's impartial are minutes. He was sent emails. He was sent extensive written material. He was sent 30 pages of evidence. The Chief of Staff, the Deputy Mayor and myself spent an hour and 45 minutes with him. So we fully cooperated with his review. And it's worth just reminding the committee that this former Chief Inspector, Sir Tom, said, and I quote, of Dame Cressida Dick, at a time we'd had the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by a servant officer, the policing of Clapham Common Vigil in a way the High Court and the Court of Appeal found to be unlawful. The advice given by the police service, fully approved by the Commissioner to, I quote, wave down a bus if you're worried about a police officer. Serving police officers sharing photographs of Nicole Smallborn and Bieber
Mr.
Hedbury.
Mayor, can we just contain it to what is actually...
I'm answering the Chair's question in a much shorter fashion than Sir Tom did to a previous question. We also had the report by the independent panel into the case of Daniel Morgan, the inquest into the victims of Stephen Port, the vehicle stop and search of Bianca Williams.
Mr. Mayor, we must keep to what is actually in the report, and the report is based around the issues.
And we had Sir Tom saying, this is one of the most talented and far-sighted police officers the police have had in living memory.
Can we come back to what we're talking about? I know you want to deflect, but please, if we could just concentrate. How many times were you asked for a meeting with Sir Tom Windsor? I'm
not sure. I've not got that correspondence, but I'm sure we can find that for you.
I'm pretty sure, reading this extensively, it was around 9 times. Can you confirm that, Sir Tom?
It was exactly 9 times.
It was 9 times.
It was exactly 9 times, and the interview took place only at the very end of the commission because the Mayor refused or failed to respond to the other invitations. If I may say a little bit about what the Mayor just said, or perhaps he hasn't finished?
I think the rules don't apply to you, so you can, yeah.
No.
Well,
Let's have a pleasant 3-hour meeting, Mr. Mayor, because we want to get to the bottom of how and why, etc., Dame Cressida left. That's what we're here for. I'm sure we'll come to other issues later. So would you actually say then that you engaged with the whole process from the beginning if you didn't agree to see Sir Tom Winsor and his colleagues 9 times?
I'm not sure about the 9 times figure, but yeah, we fully cooperated with the process that Sir Tom undertook, and I met him as soon as I could.
Right. Sir Thomas's review states that he received extensive cooperation from Dame Cressida and the Metropolitan Police, and that he has not received the same degree of assistance or cooperation from the Mayor and those for whom he is responsible. So what's your comment around that?
Well, as I've explained, the Mayor's Office of Policing and Crime fully cooperated with his review, provided him with copious amounts of material. I appreciate clearly that Sir Tom was paid to do this and had the time to do this. Dame Cressida clearly had time to see Sir Tom. As soon as I could see Sir Tom, and bearing in mind he wasn't satisfied with the copious amounts of contemporaneous documentations he was sent, the Chief of Staff, the Deputy Mayor and myself saw him. I think there was an issue with the Chief of Staff being on leave on one of the dates and the Deputy Mayor being on leave on another date. But as soon as we could all see him, we did. Acting Commissioner Steve House, Acting Deputy Commissioner Helen Ball, appointed by Steve House, clearly both made time during their busy schedules to see Sir Tom. That's a question for them about distraction doing their operational jobs. But as soon as we could, we saw Sir Tom, but he was also given copious amounts of written material. So
you're saying you didn't have time before then? Because
I'm
you were written to, I think, in April, is that correct, Sir Tom? April?
Yes, the 7th of April and on 8 subsequent occasions. And only when the Mayor saw my Maxwellisation letter giving him the gist of my conclusions on the basis of the engagement that he had provided, all of it in writing, did he suddenly demand to be interviewed, necessitating a second extension in time of the commission, because the date that he offered for interview was after the expiry of the already extended commission. I take issue with the Mayor in terms of the degree and quality of engagement, and I've explained in my report what it is. Cressida did give me over 5 hours of FaceTime for an interview. There were interviews with her CPOSA colleagues, with Assistant Commissioner Ball, with Steve House, and with others. But in spite of the Mayor's central role in all of this, I got only 90 minutes at the very end of the process, and that was to interview 3 people, not 1. I should have been able to interview the individual people, Mr. Khan, Sophie Linden and David Bellamy, separately. But instead, we had to compress it into one 1.5-hour session. And at the end, I explained to the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and the Chief of Staff that 1.5 hours was not nearly enough, but my commission had to come to an end. So, Mr. Mayor, are you saying you didn't have the time before then?
No, I've been quite clear.
No, I mean on a one-to-one basis. Clearly, Sir Tom wanted to see you face to face.
I've been quite clear. Sir Tom was given copious amounts of documentary material.
Yes, no, you've said that. I'm just asking about you actually meeting him.
As I've been quite clear, he was given copious amounts of written material, and when it was clear that he'd ignored, sometimes the only contemporaneous records. We made time, including people coming back from holiday and so forth, to see Sir Tom.
May I respond to that? One cannot assess the reliability and credibility of a witness by reading a piece of paper. You need to get them in front of you. You need to look them in the face. You need to see their body language, to hear their answers. And in a number of respects, the evidence I received on the 17th of August meeting was not satisfactory and in some respects not tenable and not credible. I did not ignore the material that the Mayor gave me. I looked at all of it with very, very great care, as is fully reflected in each page of this report. The amount of engagement that I got from the Mayor's office and from the Mayor was far below what I would have expected on a matter of this seriousness. But it was up to the Mayor to give me whatever time he was prepared to spare. But I repeat, this was supposed to take 6 weeks and it took 22.
And that's because it was extended so you could see the Mayor?
Yes.
I mean, I've looked up what you were doing in that time, and there was an awful lot of football going on and ABBA concerts, etc. So perhaps you would have had time. Do you regret now that you didn't see Sir Thomas earlier?
Well, I note the commentary and bias in your question before the question, but no, I think the reality was we expected a review to be impartial, to look at all the evidence, for weight to be given to all the witnesses. Simply because somebody happens to be an officer or a former officer, they shouldn't be given more weight. And we were surprised that there was an ignoring of all the documentary material, 30 pages of evidence, the emails in real time, and the minutes of the meetings. I'll give you one example where Sir Tom's unhappiness doesn't merit the evidence. There is one meeting where I'm present, the former Commissioner is present, and the Home Secretary is present. And there's a difference of views between Sir Tom's conclusion and my version. Sir Tom could very easily have spoken to the Home Secretary in person if he's claiming the only way to check the evidence is to look a witness in the eye and see the veracity of the materials. The Home Secretary has not been spoken to by Sir Tom in relation to that January meeting in 2022.
The other two people. The people present, principal people present, were the Mayor and the Commissioner, and the Mayor lays considerable evidence on documentary evidence. The Home Secretary's minute and her letter to me of that meeting, together with the other evidence, persuaded me that the version of that meeting that I was given by the Home Office and the Metropolitan Police was preferable to that of the Mayor. Credibility and reliability is of enormous importance, but we did our best to get the evidence. The Mayor lays emphasis on the fact that I made a remark in paragraph 21 of the report in relation to the weight of evidence to be attached to that of police officers. What he doesn't draw attention to is what I have said in relation to the overall factual accounts. And what I said is where there's been a dispute of fact, I've generally been able to attribute more weight to evidence by reference to its consistency with contemporaneous documents, something the Mayor lays emphasis on, the degree to which that evidence is corroborated by the accounts of others, the detail and specificity of the evidence, my ability to test the evidence in interview with the person concerned, including that person's willingness and ability to answer questions, and its inherent credibility and coherence. I have said as almost an afterthought, sometimes police evidence is stronger because police officers are accustomed to providing evidence in court and therefore remembering things with greater detail. But I have not said, and I have not implied, that police officers must always be believed over other people. Of course not.
No, I did read that in the report. Mr. May, as well as claiming that the review was clearly biased, which I don't think you've proved to us that it was at all. If you've anything else to say on that, please do.
Okay,
you also
so here's the context. So the context which has been said to me, and you can understand the concern people have in relation to the context, is you have a situation where you've got Steve House, who is appointed Deputy Commissioner by the former Commissioner Cressida. On her deciding to resign, the acting Commissioner, the former Deputy Commissioner Steve House, appointed by Cressida after he was had to leave Police Scotland, writes to the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, to look into the departure of the then Commissioner, who'd appointed him Deputy Commissioner, and the former Home Secretary asks Sir Tom, one of the most talented and far-sighted police leaders the police have seen in living memory, after the series of scandals, to undertake a review. The primary witnesses Sir Tom relies upon for his review are Acting Commissioner Steve House, our Acting Deputy Commissioner, former Assistant Commissioner Helen Ball, appointed by Steve House, and the version of events given by Dame Cressida's team, including the Chief Constable that Sir Tom has referred to. You compare and contrast that with the voluminous documentary material given by the Mayor's Office of Police and Crime, the minutes of the meetings, the emails, the extensive written material, the 30 pages of evidence. Nowhere in Sir Tom's report does he mention any of the series of scandals when he's asked to give a timeline in his report. And in the previous draft of this report, he spends a lot of time talking about the fact that Cressida became a dame. Those are just some of the examples of the concerns people have. Another concern people have is his report seems to fail to understand the difference between an anti-racist organisation and somebody who claims to have zero tolerance of racism. His report clearly, in his own words, shows that more weight was given to police officers than to others. And, you know, I'd like the committee, I would have liked Sir Tom to be as unhappy about the lack of dignity given to Bieber and Nicole, the lack of dignity given to Charles Q, the lack of dignity given to Sarah Everard, the lack of dignity given to those that vigil at Clapham Common, the lack of dignity to Bianca Williams, the lack of dignity to the Morgan family, the lack of dignity to the victims of Stephen Port.
That was not within the remit of this actual report. And a great many of these things happened beforehand. Before I go on to the next part.
Sorry, happened beforehand? What do you mean, Chair?
Houghton, etc. happened before.
I didn't mention Houghton, Chair.
No, I did then.
Well, I've given you a list of cases
yes.
At a time when Sir Tom thinks Dame Cressida's the best officer ever.
Sir Tom, would you like to tell us the remit that you were given, the parameters upon which you were asked to report on? Because that's what we'll be discussing today.
Yes, I was asked to look at the process, not the substance. Clearly, the factual background of the performance of the Met was relevant, but I did not, and was required not to, examine the performance of the Met or the performance of the Commissioner. The Mayor lays emphasis now on what he calls a series of scandals, and some of these things were terrible. The murder of Sarah Everard, Nicole Smallman, Bieber Henry, Daniel Morgan, Stephen Port, Bianca Williams, Child Q, the Morgan investigation, and so on. But almost all of these things happened before the Mayor, many of these things happened, before the Mayor lobbied the Home Secretary to give Cressida a 3-year extension, not a 2-year extension. And they all happened, with the exception of Houghton, the Houghton report. Remember, the Houghton events happened 4 years earlier under the watch of Bernard Hogan Howe. These things all happened before the Mayor expressed very significant confidence in the foundations for the future of the Metropolitan Police on the 19th of January 2022. So for him to reel off these other terrible things is frankly beside the point. If they were as terrible as that, why did he express on the 19th of January such unqualified support and confidence in the future of the Met? It doesn't add up. The Mayor also says that the policing of Clapham Commons vigil was found to be unlawful. That is simply not true. The High Court found that aspects of the way in which the Met prepared and engaged with the organisers of the vigil in advance had legal flaws. The policing of the vigil itself was exemplary. The Inspectorate, carried out a very, very detailed examination of the policing of the vigil, and we found that the officers in question behaved with commendable restraint and the utmost professionalism. That's not what the Mayor said that night, and I'm not surprised that the Mayor may have been embarrassed later.
Yep, we are going on to those specifics later on in our next section.
By the way, legal flaws means unlawful.
Yes. If
I
you
thought
want to.
a lawyer may know that.
Well, I'm sure we all know that. And before we go any further, I'd like to say on behalf of the entire committee, we all think those things that occurred were absolutely dreadful. There's not one of us that isn't appalled by that. Nevertheless, quite rightfully, we're discussing this specific report at the moment. So clearly biased, you claim. Also, you say that it ignores the facts. So can you just tell us what specific facts were ignored and the basis for that claim?
A number of facts were ignored. We'll go later on, I'm sure, in the timeline to the meeting in January. We'll go also to the number of facts that occurred after the extension of Dame Cressida Dick's contract, again ignored by Sir Tom in his report. Sir Tom also ignored, actually, the Home Secretary was asked about the January meeting, and it's been misrepresented to the committee, which I'll come into later on in relation to this session this morning. Also ignored from the report were the timelines relevant to not just the decision making, but the pre and post decision making as well in February of this year. He again is misrepresented, as indeed you fell into the trap of doing. Houghton. Houghton did not all occur before Dame Cressida Dick was the Commissioner. Houghton was between 2016 and 2018. Dame Cressida Dick was appointed in March 2017, and in the reports of the IOPC, the incidents are neither historic or isolated, and subsequent investigations by the IOPC have confirmed similar behaviour.
We will come on to issues around that later. Mr. Mayor, the review states that in relation to its draft findings, for the most part, the Mayor's office have simply responded to the former Commissioner's accounts where Sir Tom accepted it in the draft findings rather than providing their own detailed positive accounts. Given your comments around the review, ignoring the facts, why did you not take the opportunity to provide your own account of the facts? You've responded to the facts more than given your own account.
We did. The Mayor's Office Police and Crime did give Sir Tom, inverted commas, our version of events, because clearly there's a different version of events.
Well, the events are the events. Sir Thomas, do you think the Mayor took the investigation seriously from the outset?
Well, I don't know what it was in his mind, only he knows that. Certainly the degree of engagement was remarkably slight. He did write me some letters, and we took them all into account, but the real importance was to be able to put to him what I had heard from the other side. The Metropolitan Police and Dame Cressida gave me very significant amounts of information at the beginning, and we were eager to talk to the Mayor about that. When we got no agreement to interviews, I drafted the findings in fact, which were based on, but not identical to, what I'd heard from the Met, because that's the only place I'd heard anything from yet, and of course the interviews that I'd had with Cressida Dick, Steve House and others. And it was that document to which the Mayor responded. A lot of what the Mayor came back with was irrelevant to my investigation, because they were about the substance of the performance of the Met, and the Mayor's mentioned that today. This report was about process, not substance. Those are the terms of reference, and I've made that point over and over again in the report. So what happened in these series of scandals, as the Mayor describes them, some of them are scandals undoubtedly, is not relevant to how the Mayor behaved and how Cressida Dick behaved in the critical period running up to the 10th of February 2022. And, you know, we can talk about things that are irrelevant to the report, if you like, but this is what the report is about. It's about process, not substance, and what happened, who said what to whom, and how did they react.
Okay, thank you. I'm mindful of the fact that I've been speaking a long while, so I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Onka Sahota.
Thank you, Sir Tom, for coming. I just want to clarify 1 or 2 questions. Did you ever lobby the Mayor to appoint Sadiq as the Commissioner for Police?
No.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
I can add to that.
Well, now that you've clarified that you've never lobbied the...
I spoke to him about it.
Okay.
The Mayor and I were sitting next to each other at the London Government dinner at the Mansion House in the January before she was appointed. And the Mayor turned to me and said, what do you think of the candidates for Commissioner of the Met? What's your opinion? He asked me a perfectly reasonable question and I gave him my opinion. That's not lobbying. That's a courteous reply to a question that he put to me.
Okay. Are you aware of any other commissions being set up by a Home Secretary like yours at the resignation or the leaving of any other previous Metropolitan Commissioner? Are you aware of any of those?
No.
So this was a unique commission, specifically in very limited terms of reference, right? Because you were only about to look at the process, not the substance, right? But this is the first time you're aware of any commission being set up by a Home Secretary into this sort of process.
Correct.
Thank you. Did you ever feel that you were conflicted in carrying out this commission?
Not in the least.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to get this on the record.
Thank you. Assembly Member Devonish.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, good morning. You're talking about bias at the beginning of this meeting, which is a very serious charge. Do you think the Times newspaper is biased normally?
It depends on what topic. When it comes to endorsements at elections, I like to endorse my party rather than yours.
Well, there was a very, very well-written editorial on the 3rd of September, the day after Sir Tom's report. The headline was due process. Do you agree that what we're discussing today, due process, sums it up pretty much?
Your question's asking me to comment on a Times leader.
My question is, do you consider the topic that we're discussing today, the utmost seriousness of the topic, is due process?
Absolutely. And in fact, in the days leading up to me losing confidence in the Commissioner, when I'd been asked about the Commissioner, I'd said she deserves due process. In fact, the transcripts show I was cognizant and had the form of mind due process, in other words, to enable her to have an opportunity to let me know what her plans were to address the serious issues, which the series of scandals, which we're not allowed to talk about, according to the Chair and Sir Tom, the series of scandals had led me to a view that the Commissioner had to come up with a plan to address those issues and a plan to address issues of trust and confidence. And I used the 2 words, due process, when I was being pushed in relation to that issue. I think she deserved the opportunity to come forward and give her version of the events. I'd make this point, though, which the Chair didn't mention, neither did Sir Tom. The statutory process set out in the 2011 Act was never used by me. It was never invoked. There is process there. And in fact, Sir Ian Blair wasn't given the opportunity to have an improvement plan, as I did with Dame Cressida. So I, in fact, had more, gave the Commissioner more opportunities than previous commissioners had been given. So, I take due process very seriously. I did follow due process. Sir Tom disagrees. That's his view. And obviously, in a democracy, you've got different journalists, different leaders entitled to come up with their own views. And I fully respect the Times on this issue. I disagree with them.
Okay. The Times says the report raises serious questions even over Mr. Khan's judgment, end quote. It goes on to say, what matters is that the Mayor himself, a lawyer, strictly observes the rules of legal procedure. Do you agree with the latter? I
agree. Aside from being a lawyer, I think you should. And that's one of the reasons why I just don't understand, even to this day, why Dame Cressida didn't come to the meeting we scheduled for the 10th of February. I think people deserve an opportunity to put forward an alternative. Look, there have been many occasions in the past where Dame Cressida and I disagreed in the Clapham Common Vigil, right? But the Deputy Commissioner, the Commissioner came to see me. We had a discussion. and that was due process. The same goes in relation to other issues. The action plan, we disagreed, but we came forward with a compromise. There are other examples I can give you in relation to the last 4 or 5 years where we've, come from different positions and we've met. I've given her the opportunity to explain her point of view. She's changed my mind. On occasions, I'd like to think I've changed her mind. But it is important when you've got a close working relationship with somebody like a commissioner, whether it's transport, fire, police, that you respect each other. And that means giving the other person the opportunity to present their case. It's a process of natural justice.
I'll leave it there, Chair, but I just ask that Mr Khan does actually read this editorial, because I do think it was absolutely damning. But I'd ask him to reflect on what it says. It's very well written. Thank you.
Can I just respond to this due process point?
Please.
The Mayor has said today he cares about due process. And he has also said on other occasions that he, in the events leading up to the 10th of February, went above and beyond the requirements of due process. Due process is required by the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011, the Policing Protocol Order 2011, and Regulation 11A of the Police Regulations 2003. In my report, I explain exactly what they require. The Mayor's position appears to be that he did more than it was required. And yet, what is required is giving the Commissioner notice in writing of his grounds for seeking her removal, which he didn't do, then consulting the Chief Inspector of Constabulary for his views in writing and taking them into account. He didn't do that. He did not give the Commissioner a hearing. He did not obtain the approval of the Home Secretary. He did none of those things.
Okay.
Here's where.
Okay,
well, hold on a second. I mean, if the question was to me, so in response, Sir Tom's wrong. The reason why Sir Tom is wrong is because we never invoked the statutory process. Had that meeting occurred on the 10th of February, that Dame Cressida didn't turn up to.
We'll come to this in the next bit. And then
you can't have it both ways, Chair. You can't on one occasion.
I think a chair can actually, and I'm happy to bring you in on this subject.
The point being is that the process wasn't
in
invoked
the next section.
Because Dame Cressida didn't come to the meeting.
Well, I think we can go further into that, and we will do in the next section. We'll finish this one off. I'm then very happy for you to say what you want to, but we'll bring that into the next section. My colleague touched on this. An allegation of bias is actually a very serious one to make of an independent public servant. And our lawyer, I've Googled you, Sir Tom, of over 40 years' experience. And of course, someone whose record of independence is exemplary. And it can be quite damaging to call a public servant biased. Do you stand by saying you think he's biased?
I think the report was biased. It ignored facts. It presented as facts accounts from police officers while ignoring or downplaying other extensive outstanding evidence.
You've also implied, that City Hall briefed journalists in writing when the report was published. It said that Mr Winsor had Conservative Party allegiances, and he's covered answers to that. And you also implied that in the 10 years Mr Winsor was Chief Inspector of the Constabulary, the Inspectorate was soft on the Met, and it is only now under a new Chief Inspector that the Met is being subject to proper scrutiny. So, Mr Winsor, what do you have to say about that? Did you ever consider putting the Met into special measures at any point? Can you put your mic? Thanks.
Special measures is what the journalists call it. We call it engage, but I know what you mean. The Met, in my almost 10 years as Chief Inspector of Constabulary, received consistently mixed reports as part of the Peel programme. They were very good at serious organised crime and counter-terrorism, and they were pretty middling to bad in relation to just about everything else. The idea that we, the Inspectorate, were soft on the Met until my successor, Andy Cook, took over is utterly absurd. In December 2017, we, under my leadership, published the most damning report on any subject, on any police force, ever in the history of the inspectorate since 1856, and it was in relation to child protection and the Met, and members of this committee will remember that. The inspectorate has a process whereby a force will go into the engage, so-called special measures, status if we are not satisfied that it has an adequate remedial plan. The inspector also has what you might call a waiting room, a watch list. That's what we called it, a watch list of forces who were being actively considered for being put into special measures because we were very concerned about them, but not to the point of actually putting them into special measures. And the Met were there for years and years. And there were significant discussions amongst the HMIs and me as to whether or not the Met should go into special measures. There were disagreements amongst the HMIs. And the reason that the Met didn't go into special measures until latterly was because we were satisfied, and this was in relation to child protection, because we were commissioned to do 3 monthly revisits. We'd never been asked to do that before in relation to the Met and child protection. We were satisfied, and the HMI for London, Matt Parr, who is still the HMI for London, said, I don't think it needs to go into special measures because MOPAC are providing the necessary scrutiny and discipline to the Met, and therefore putting them into special measures would serve no purpose. Now, ultimately, just as I was coming to the end of my term, it was very clear that we were going to put them into special measures. My term ended on the 31st of March, so that's a decision taken after I left. And that is not only because the Met was failing, it's also because MOPAC were failing.
Okay, thank you. And my colleague, Assemblymember Russell, would like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a question first for Sir Tom. You said earlier, and I quote, "One cannot assess the reliability and credibility of a witness by reading a piece of paper. You need them in front of you. You need to look them in the eye. Look them in the face, sorry. You need to see their body language to hear their answers." But you decided, and you explained this in paragraph 18 and also in paragraph 22, that you were not going to interview the Home Secretary. And I just wonder why you decided not to look the Home Secretary in the face and just take the written submission from the Home Secretary as opposed to the process you went through with the Mayor.
I didn't think it was necessary because I would get the best evidence from the Mayor if he consented to talk to me.
Mr. Mayor, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the reason why your question is relevant is because actually, even in Sir Tom's report, he accepts he's given us a paragraph of the Home Secretary's letter about that January meeting. And that paragraph in the Home Secretary's letter is very different from the conclusion that Sir Tom reaches. It's page 15. The Home Secretary, in a letter to me dated 6th of June, recalled that the Mayor had expressed the view that he had never had more confidence in the foundations of a positive year. Noting specifically the Police Uplift Programme, recruitment in London, the successive violent reduction unit during bringing down crime, and engagement with health and education partners. That meeting was to discuss the performance for the year. And I've said publicly, and I said this the day when Dame Cressida resigned, she had a big role in driving down violent crime. So, to answer your question, Caroline, I said, looking Sir Tom in the eye, that meeting wasn't supreme confidence in her in relation to her job and other issues I'm concerned about. It's in relation to the core issues the Home Sec and I were discussing with Dame Cressida, bringing down violent crime, the work of the VRU. We'd have more than 33,000 officers versus 30,000 officers. Had Sir Tom met with the Home Secretary, asked him those questions, she would have confirmed my version of events, even though neither of us are serving or former police officers.
That brings me to my next question, which is for you, Mr. Mayor, which it relates to paragraph 21, where Sir Tom says, I have also had some regard to the fact that police officers are particularly experienced in the need to recall with accuracy events and discussions subsequently so as to provide evidence to the criminal standard before the criminal courts. And what I'd like to know is, as a lawyer, are you expected to provide evidence to the criminal standard before criminal courts?
See, I think this paragraph will be seized on by not just community leaders, not just by lawyers, not just by those who want to see police reform and reform of how the police are policed, as the mask slipping. Because when I was a criminal lawyer, we would often have clients nervous about having a trial in the magistrate's court, because a magistrate would tend to believe a police officer over almost anything a lay member of the public said. And where it's possible for a defendant to do so, he or she would choose trial by jury, because 12 members of the public will give you a better hearing than a magistrate in their view, because magistrates believed everything police officers said because of the reasons you've alluded to, even when they're being contradicted, not just by my account, the Chief of Staff's account, the Deputy Mayor's account, 30 pages of written documentary evidence, emails, minutes, rebutting the reference to the gist of a report. And before I met Sir Tom, and before I wrote the various letters he refers to in a sneering way, I refreshed my memory by using aide-memoirs, whether it's minutes, whether it's emails or so forth. I'll give you one example. On many occasions, when I was at a meeting, minutes would be taken. One such occasion was on the 2nd of February 2022. There is only one contemporaneous record of that meeting, that minute. Dame Cressida was there. Deputy Commissioner Steve House wasn't there. I think Assistant Commissioner Helen Ball was there. The Chief of Staff was there. The Deputy Mayor for Police and Crime was there, and I was there. And we have a minute of the meeting. So Tom has chosen not to believe my version of events, the Chief of Staff's version of events, the Deputy Mayor's version of events, the minutes of the meeting. He's chosen to believe the version of events from two serving officers.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Chair.
Okay, before I bring in one of my other colleagues, are you referring to the minutes of that meeting that didn't include anything to do with Baby P or Ed Balls? Because the Deputy Mayor, after that meeting, admitted that that had come up and it wasn't reflected in the minutes taken by your Chief of Staff. So clearly some things were missing from those minutes.
Is that a comment or a question?
It's a question.
Right. So let's go to those minutes. What Sir Tom's report says in relation to Deputy Mayor Sophie Linden is she had a recollection of Baby P being mentioned. What he also says in his report is that the minutes reflect not just what happened when everyone else was in the room, but were almost a rehash of the one-to-one meeting Dame Cressida and I had had. The minutes are the best record of that 2nd of February meeting. There are no other written accounts. Now, 2nd of February 2022, 7 months later, or 6 months later, Sir Tom interviews Dame Cressida and Helen Ball, who've got no aide-memoir to refresh their memory. The only document that's contemporaneous is the notes of the minute. Not a verbatim account, but the note of the meeting.
Yeah, which I think we established that there were, the report established, I'm not sure. We're going to come to that in the next section, which we're nearly coming to now.
Can I just correct one thing? The Mayor has said several times, as far as the 2nd of February meeting is concerned, there is only one contemporaneous minute. That's not true. The Met made a very detailed note of what had happened at the time. And I had regard to that as well. So it's just not correct to say there's only one contemporaneous minute. There's only one contemporaneous minute that the Mayor's office produced, but there are contemporaneous documents produced by the Met.
Thank you for
And
clarification.
the other thing is that, and we'll get into the Baby P material, I'm sure, but the reality is that the Mayor complains that I preferred one form of evidence over another, or one person's evidence over another, whether it's in writing or in person. The fact of the matter is, when there was a material difference in facts, I had to make a decision as to who was telling the truth.
Okay, thank you for that. Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I was going to make this point later, but in light of Assemblymember Russell's question referencing the Home Secretary, I will make this point now. I think it's important to put on record, and for the benefit of Londoners watching this today's proceedings, that this committee did invite the former Home Secretary and the Commissioner to this meeting. They are not here. I accept that the Commissioner has given extensive evidence to Sir Winsor, but to have them both here, especially the ex-Home Secretary, would have given us a better all-round picture of the situation. As I understand it, the Home Secretary said she can't attend, the ex-Home Secretary. I'm not sure why she can't attend. All I've been told is that she can't attend.
Yes, of course we can only invite guests, but we have summoned the Mayor, but we can only invite guests. I think we've finished with that particular section of the meeting. Is it on this?
Yes,
yeah.
very briefly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to come back to the point that you made, Sir Tom, in response to Assemblymember Russell's point about the Mayor's point about the contemporaneous record of that meeting that happened. Even if there was a second record from the Met Police, I'm just wondering, that process that you followed, which of the two did you give more weight? And why?
I gave due weight to all the material that I was given, both the material in writing and the oral evidence. But when there's a material difference in fact, I have to weigh the evidence according to corroboration, contemporaneousness, specificity, people's recollection, credibility and reliability of witnesses. It's the whole picture. It's not just one thing, that a written note is superior to oral evidence. In fact, usually it's the other way around. But the whole factual matrix was taken into account. And my report doesn't become biased just because somebody who is criticised in the report doesn't like it.
I'm sure I read this. Did you change some things within the report? Didn't you after, perhaps I didn't read it, I thought I read that you changed some things after you actually had the opportunity to see the Mayor?
Both when I received, at a very late stage, 30 pages and so on of comments on the draft findings in fact. We made a lot of changes to the draft findings in fact in the light of what the Mayor had put to us. But again, I said to the Mayor and MOPAC, I need to see you, I need to talk to you. Eventually that was agreed. There was a 90-minute meeting on the 17th of August, and after that we worked very hard for the whole week between the 17th of August and 24th of August, which was the end of my commission, revising the conclusions and reflecting in detail, and it's all throughout the report, exactly what the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and Mr Bellamy had put to me.
So you took full notice of what the Mayor actually said, and of the, well, just to confirm, because clearly the Mayor's smiling, and I just wondered whether you could just confirm that.
A proper reading of the report will show that there is a very great deal of material which reflects what the Mayor put to me, and in many cases I say I accept the Mayor's evidence. So the idea that I've ignored all the facts is, as I said at the beginning, absurd.
Yes, I have read that. Thank you. So we're now coming to the next section, and that's going to be led by my colleague, Assemblymember Pigeon.
Thank you very much. And obviously we're clearly looking at process here, not the substance, the discussions that we had earlier about what had been going on in the Met. So a few areas I'd just like to seek some clarification. Perhaps I could start with you, Mr Mayor, please. In paragraph 29, and it's already been mentioned this morning, that early September 2021, correspondence was exchanged between the Mayor and the Home Secretary confirming the extension of the Commissioner's appointment, and correspondence showed that you'd expressed a preference for a 3-year extension. to enable the mayor elected in May 2024 to play a role in the selection of the next commissioner. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah.
Because there were overwhelming grounds, you've already listed
sure.
which might suggest you wouldn't want the commissioner to stay in post.
So
Do you want to set out why you supported that?
It's a process point. It's a courtesy Boris Johnson gave to me. So Boris Johnson could have decided to extend Bernard Hogan-Howe in advance of the elections in 2016, and what Boris Johnson did, to his credit, was to allow the new mayor to be elected in May 2016 and then to make a decision on the then commissioner and a new commissioner following that. And so that's the reason why. 1 year was clearly just kicking the can down the road, so it made more sense if you're going to extend to 3 years. So I did support the Home Secretary in her decision to extend the former commissioner's contract, ostensibly, and this is also a matter of record, which is confirmed. Appreciate Sir Tom didn't have the time to meet the Home Secretary, but in her written ministerial statement, where the Home Sec confirms, because of the pandemic, because of the need for stability and experience, she decided to extend the contract, which I supported. Before the extension, the Home Secretary and I had discussed the progress we'd made in relation to the core issue we were focused on, which is reducing violent crime, and we had made progress and continue to make progress. The incidents that caused me concern before the extension, we'll come on to hopefully, is concerns in relation to the black community's confidence or lack of in the police, which led to the action plan in the face of opposition from the Commissioner. We can come on to that. The concerns in relation to Clapham Common, we can come on to that. At the time of the extension, we didn't know the full facts of what Wayne Couzens had done and not done. That only came out on the 1st of October because of reporting restrictions. The Commissioner was aware, I wasn't. And the other thing which happened before the extension was the publication of the Morgan report, of course. After the extension, a number of additional things arise. After the extension, we've got the situation in relation to what we now know about Wayne Couzens in relation to other incidents, and also in relation to Sarah Everard's Poor abduction, rape and murder. We had the Commissioner supporting, after the extension, wave down a bus as advice to women who are concerned. After the extension, I'm told there's another police officer who's been charged and arrested for rape. I speak to the Commissioner after the extension and say it's last chance saloon for her in relation to concerns I have about these issues. I rang up the Home Secretary over a number of times after the extension, and I told the Home Secretary my confidence had been shaken in the Commissioner as well. And I wrote to the Home Secretary in relation to the need for a public inquiry akin to Stephen Lawrence and the issues raised in the Lawrence inquiry. The Home Secretary, to her credit, agreed to appoint Dame Angiolini, and I agreed with her, don't have a public inquiry because it may delay things. Start, with the terms of reference, and if there's a need to make it into public inquiry, because you've got powers to compel, you can do so. And I also asked the police to look into a review of culture and standards. I disagreed with the Commissioner's suggestion for who should undertake that review, and the Commissioner agreed to my suggestion of Dame Louise Casey. After the extension is the inquest into the horrific murders of Stephen Port, Anthony Walgate, Jack Taylor, Gabriel Kavari and Daniel Whitworth. The inquest is after the extension of the contract, and you'll be aware I asked the HMI to look into the issue of the incidents arising after that. And of course you've got Hutton. I'd make this point, which the Chair didn't want to go into, but it's just a matter of record. It's a matter of record that when Sir Tom was Chief Inspector, the Met Police Service wasn't in the engaged process. They weren't in the engaged process after he stopped being Chief Inspector and after Dame Cressida had left.
Yeah, well, we've had a clear response on that, so I don't want to get into that. I just want to be very clear that you supported, in the September of 2021, as is written in this report, for Dame Cressida to have 2 years, and in fact, for the reasons you've given, you had actually called for 3 years.
Correct.
Some stuff was known before that, more you're saying came out after.
Correct.
Can I just get some clarification on a couple of other points in the report? So, on page 21, in the footnote, it states that the IOPC draft report re-Operation Houghton was sent to MOPAC in September 2021. and also to the Met Police. So, Mr Mayor, who saw this in MOPAC, and were you briefed on this, either verbally or in writing?
So the first anybody in MOPAC knew about the WhatsApp messages, the detail, and so forth was on the 27th of January 2022. On my insistence, and this was something that had begun recently, the police were letting MOPAC know about cases of complaints. No detail was given in relation to Houghton.
This is the IOPC, not the Met. The IOPC draft report was sent about Operation Hutton. That's what it states.
No, it's the learning report that has the details. Basically, that was the
but this initial report, draft report, was sent. We're told that was sent by the IOPC. I'm just wondering, did you see that? Did you see that?
Not only did I not see it, MOPAC were not aware of the details of the IOPC report until the 27th of January 2022.
They were aware of something.
Correct.
And were you aware of something?
No. Sorry, you know there are cases taking place. You're not sure about the detail.
You hadn't been briefed. This could be worrying, Mr Mayor. We're concerned about it.
Nobody in MOPAC or City Hall was aware of the details, the offensive WhatsApp messages, the systemic cultural issues until the 27th of January. Dame Cressida and the Deputy Commissioner, Assistant Commissioner Helen Ball, my understanding is, were aware. None of them alerted us to the issues.
Okay, and then just one other clarification before I move into a few specifics that I want to pick up with you. We've been talking about minutes. You've talked about copious amounts of material. We all pour over minutes. On the 2nd of February, as it states in paragraph 58, you met privately with the Commissioner, and it says you spoke alone for about 40 minutes. Was there a record of that meeting? Were there any notes of that meeting?
No, the gist of that meeting was similar to the meeting we had afterwards with staff. It wasn't uncommon for Dame Cressida and I to meet on a one-to-one and then to have staff present, because sometimes, human nature, you open it more one-to-one.
Okay, and then paragraph 67 of the report, it claims that you had asked the Commissioner to secure some external legal advice to see if there's any way you could challenge IOPC's position in relation to officers. Just wondering whether you then went on and secured your own legal advice.
No, things moved on, as you know, in the space of the next 9 days. But the point I was trying to get across to Dame Cressida was she was accepting at face value something. And so I'll give you a couple of examples where that doesn't work. In the case of Child Q, the IPC were investigating the officers for misconduct, which I think is not good enough. So I wrote to the IPC and said it should be gross misconduct, and my representations led to them going from misconduct to gross misconduct. If you remember Bianca Williams, the awful case of the stat stop and search, the Commissioner stood by the officers completely. The Deputy Commissioner went a step further. He said, I've seen the video evidence, right, and I support my officers. I'm paraphrasing. In fact, the Deputy Mayor insisted that the Met Police Service referred to the IPC, and there are now charges pending against those officers. My point was, look, there's an issue here in relation to some serious issues exposed by Operation Houghton. You're accepting at face value the issue of what you're saying in relation to the IPC, which, by the way, even if it is the case, if you take legal advice, A, you can check and you can test the boundaries, but B, you can say to the public, look, my hands are tied. I'm as outraged as you, but the legal advice is quite clear. There's no scope to go forward. And an example where I've done this is in relation to an issue that's pertinent to you, is City Airport. When I became mayor, people were angry about me not taking a bigger stand against City Airport in relation to the expansion. I got legal advice, and the legal advice says this is a hopeless case. You may as well accede to City Airport. So people knew in relation to my views about the legal advice was quite clear, and I couldn't understand why Dame Cressida wasn't taking legal advice.
So the Met weren't taking legal advice, but did you then decide, actually, I'm so concerned about this, I'm going to take my own, just so I'm clear there's no other avenues?
No, I didn't, for the simple reason things had moved on. In 9 days' time, I think she'd resigned.
OK, but I still think it might have been an area you'd want to. But let's just move on then. So I want to pick up a discussion that I had at the last meeting of this committee. In paragraph 70 of this report, it states, the Mayor ultimately stated that they, the Metropolitan Police and MOPAC, needed a joint plan, which his team would help the Commissioner's staff to produce, and the two teams should get together as soon as possible. And I think the minutes from that meeting reflect that. So what changed?
Well, they don't reflect that. And so let me go to the minutes rather than Sir Tom's version of events. So the minutes on page 2 firstly confirm that I said Operation Hosson would be the straw that broke the camel's back, not the conclusion reached by Sir Tom. But second to last paragraph on that minutes, by the minutes is the most accurate record of that thing at the meeting. The Commissioner said she would appreciate insight from the Mayor's team into public views and possible communication approaches. That's not a joint plan. That's assistance in relation to communications. And over the page, on the last page, third to last paragraph, the Mayor asked if the Commissioner felt accepting institutional issues was not the answer with what she was going to say. The Commissioner asked for help with a new communication strategy, something eye-catching and different, and suggesting holding a seminar to devise a new communication strategy. So it was not a joint plan, as has been suggested by either Dame Cressida Dick, her police officers who were interviewed by Sir Tom, or by Sir Tom. It was a plan from the Commissioner. The joint plan was in relation to help in relation to communications, and the Commissioner was thinking about a seminar. My point to the Commissioner was there was an urgency here in relation to her plan to address these issues, but also to win back the trust and confidence. And what I thought would happen was that we would meet again whenever we next met to discuss her plan, draft plan, whatever you want to call it, and go forward.
Okay, well that's very interesting, because when we spoke at our last meeting to Diana Lutchford, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Mayor's Office of Police and Crime, she confirmed that her recollection was that there would be a joint plan. And she then went on, I said to her that she would obviously have had to allocate officer time to that, even if it was assistance around communications of the plan and so on. And she then withdrew that because they were not helping, MOPAC were not helping the Met. And I asked her, who spoke to you? What was said to you to change the action? She said, I cannot explicitly remember. So I'm wondering, was it from you, Mr Mayor? Did you instruct the Chief Executive of MOPAC to take away the assistance, whatever level it was, to input into this plan and communications?
No.
So it wasn't you, was it your Deputy Mayor?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what
Was it your Chief of Staff?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
Director
because there
of
was
Operations?
In my mind, there was no understanding of a joint plan. The help was going to be in relation to comms. And in fact, I think the City Hall may have offered the next day some help with comms. That was the nature of any. But it's got to be the Commission's plan. Look, can you just think about it a second? I mean, the Commission not unreasonably wouldn't want anybody else to interfere with operational matters. So the idea was that the Commission would come up with a plan which we could then go forward with. She'd asked specifically for help in communications, as the minutes reflect. But my view was a seminar, a long-term plan in relation to communications, assistance on the medium to long-term on communications, wasn't going to wash.
Okay, so there's a huge section in here about that plan, and you've made your view clear. In paragraph 74, it states, at the end of the meeting as a whole, the Mayor said to the Commissioner words to the effect that, quote, one or other of us is going to end up being substituted. What would a reasonable person on the street think that this meant?
Well, a reasonable person on the street would hopefully have heard the entire meeting. And I was quite clear, a seminar on communications, a long-term plan to do with these issues wasn't going to wash. It's really important for us to recognise the urgency of this. I'm up for re-election in 2024. Her contract expires in a couple of years' time, as it was from them. We can't wait for these long-term plans in relation to comms or stakeholder plan or whatever. We needed a plan now. And, the idea of support towards devising a seminar to do a new comms strategy, which could be sometime in the future, wasn't what was required.
Okay. I've got a couple of other questions. Did anyone want to come in on that?
Well, I think we should ask if Sir Tom wants to.
Sir Tom, do you want to respond to what you've heard about the plan? And obviously you may have seen or heard Diana Lutchford's response to me a couple of weeks ago.
Well, I've read the plan, and it's about a lot more than just a seminar. It was a joint plan. The Mayor's recollection is imperfect.
Okay. Does anybody else want to come in at this point? Caroline isn't finished yet, but is there anything else on anything? You're coming in later anyway, or do you want to? Yes. come in later. Okay, do you want to finish
Lovely.
yours?
Thank you very much. So, Tom, in your report, and you certainly describe in paragraph 88, the MOPAC chief exec said in conversations with the Met, she emphasised the position was grave. She herself was in a difficult position in terms of how to advise the mayor. Do you think, and what's your view on the position and behaviour of the chief exec of MOPAC in this?
She's the chief executive and works to the mayor. So I think she was trying hard to reflect the mayor's objectives and priorities and wishes to the extent that she knew what they were.
Do you think she was put in a difficult, impossible position?
I think that she and the deputy mayor may very well have been in a difficult position, but I don't know what they knew about what the mayor wanted. I think that in some respects, in the period between the 2nd and the 10th of February 2022, there may, and I don't know if this is the case or not, there may have been some kind of failure in communication between them and the mayor. But only they and the mayor know that. What they were not doing was giving the Met, Cressida Dick and others, much in the way of assistance or feedback on the joint plan, and the material feedback on the joint plan came on the 10th of February, which was the day the mayor or the mayor's office gave the commissioner an ultimatum.
Do you think that the chief exec of MOPAC should have spoken to you much earlier in this process? Because she's effectively a civil servant. She's not one of the mayor's top appointees like the deputy mayor. You know, she's not politically appointed, as it were. Should she have spoken to you separately and earlier? As I would expect any sort of inquiry with the chief exec of a council, you'd expect to speak to them separately and probably ahead of the leader. Would you not have expected her to have met with you earlier?
In my first letter to the mayor, I asked for access to him and his principal staff. But for some considerable time, those letters were either not responded to at all, or the requests for interviews were not granted. I think Diana Lutchford may very well have been eager to talk to me, but I don't know. I just don't know. All I knew was that I was getting very little back from the mayor's office in terms of face-to-face meetings. I was receiving written material. It wasn't very extensive until the latter stages of the investigation. But you know, the mayor did write me a number of letters which were helpful and enabled me to arrive at my provisional findings in fact. And then when, of course, I provided the provisional findings in fact in writing, I got a lot more back from the mayor. But the interview, you know, it was 90 minutes with 3 people, whereas with Cressida Dick, it was over 5 hours with her alone, and Steve House, Helen Ball, and others. So there were significant amount more face time with the people on the Metropolitan Police side of the question than with the mayor's office. But the mayor said he could only provide me, initially it was only an hour, but it did go on for another half hour after that.
Lovely, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I want to turn to, there's a section in this report which details what happened on the day that Cressida left her post or was put in that position. And there's a lot of description in here, sort of paragraph 140 and so on, where the Chief of Staff, in this report it states, says that if Cressida resigned at the end of her 9th of April original contract, then the Mayor would emphasise in public comments that she'd achieved much and also started to almost negotiate the terms of her departure. How do you respond to that? Does it feel appropriate?
I mean, I did put on record, I still do, her long service to our city, 40 years public service. So I have put on record her long service. In relation to the conversations between members of my staff and Dame Cressida's staff, I wasn't aware that Dame Cressida had a senior partner from a law firm, a chief constable, a deputy chief constable, the deputy commissioner, the director of corporate affairs, all listening into these conversations. My understanding was that my chief of staff was trying to encourage Dame Cressida to come to the meeting. It was inexplicable. A commissioner not coming to a meeting. We'd in the past had differences. We'd worked them through, and she knew that the draft plan that had been sent to me, I considered a draft. It wasn't enough to address the two core issues. How do you address the issues, the terrible series of scandals? How do you win back trust and confidence? And so those are conversations taking place, as I understand it, to encourage her to come to that meeting. And that, by the way, confirms your point about resignation, that the statutory process had not been invoked. The circumstances you suggested where a chief executive may ring up the chief inspector or, by the way, the Home Secretary, is if it's the case that I've decided, after meeting with the Commissioner, for example, on the 10th of February, I said, look, I've met with you. I'm afraid your plan doesn't wash. You've not come up with anything else. I have lost confidence in you, so I'm now going to invoke the statutory process. That didn't happen. And in that circumstance, I'd expect the Chief Executive of MOPAC to ring up the Chief Inspector, to ring up the Home Secretary and so forth, and the statutory process gets going. The statutory process never got going because the Commissioner didn't come to that meeting, and as you've alluded to, she decided to resign.
Well, what I'm trying to clarify here, thank you for that, is the fact that in this report it states the Mayor's Chief of Staff said the Mayor would be willing to pay her 6 months' salary and this was not open to negotiation. How do you respond to that specific comment that your Chief of Staff was negotiating terms of departure with somebody who was not an employee of yours, was not an employee of MOPAC? And was that appropriate in your view?
That's the version of events in Sir Tom's report. That's not what the Chief of Staff would say happened. And I'm more than happy for you to speak directly to the Chief of Staff in relation to those issues. But you're reading a version in Sir Tom's report.
Okay. Sir Tom, could I come to you and get what is your view on what you put out in here, the behaviour, the position of the Mayor's Chief of Staff in effectively trying to negotiate something? Was it within his remit to do that? Was he acting potentially ultra vires? And what's your view on that?
I think it was part of the pressure that was being applied to the Commissioner to persuade her to resign without, as the Mayor accepts, invoking the statutory process. We've accepted that statutory process is due process, but it wasn't followed. I don't know what remit the Mayor's Chief of Staff had, but the evidence that I received made it led me to the inescapable conclusion that the Mayor's Chief of Staff was acting on the authority of the Mayor. He wasn't doing some free enterprise. There was just one thing, there's quite a lot of things the Mayor said, but we don't have all day. He referred to his not being aware that other people were listening into a phone call. That's just not true. And I make that clear in footnote 17 on page 42. People were not listening into the phone call, and I'm surprised the Mayor, having read page 42, says the opposite. He wasn't there.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll leave it there. I'll come back in later. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to other colleagues in a minute. But sorry, thank you. I've got a list. I'll come back in a second. Can I ask you, Mr. Mayor, do you think you're responsible for the Commissioner going?
Absolutely. Okay. I lost confidence in her, in her ability to address the serious issues that had been exposed over the previous months. Okay. Although the Chief Inspector had full confidence in her, I didn't.
Okay, thank you. I have a list, Assembly Member Prince. So you're on the end of it. I'm sorry. I think we were going to try and tie things in, but it's going to be too difficult because so many of us have read the report. The report is full of so much. I think we're just going to have to go through our various questions. So apologies. I think it's going to jump from part to part. So I'll now go over to Assembly Member Unmesh Desai.
Thank you, Chair. If I can ask you, Mr. Mayor, we heard a lot about this meeting on the 19th of January, and you mentioned 2 or 3 agenda items that were discussed at the meeting. I think you talked about the Violence Reduction Unit, the Officer Uplift Program. But can you tell us more about your version of events on that day? Can you talk us through the trilateral on this particular day? Because it has been suggested that you express confidence in the MPS and the former Commissioner's leadership.
Let me just be clear. I did express confidence in our ability to reduce violent crime. When you compare when I first became mayor, the number of officers we had then, we'd gone down to less than 30,000. We didn't have a violence reduction unit. And so I said to the Home Secretary, and it's got, and I maintain this, I had full confidence in our ability to address the issues that we were there to discuss. And her letter to Sir Tom, I know Sir Tom didn't meet with her, but her letter to Sir Tom, and there's only a few lines, we've not seen the letter, in Sir Tom's report confirm my version of events. The foundations for the next year I had full confidence in. She references police uplift programme, paragraph 41. That's police numbers. At that stage, we're at 33,000 from a position less than 30,000. Of course, I've got much more confidence now. She references the success of the violence reduction unit, and I actually thanked the Home Secretary for the £7 million. And I said this shows the difference funding can make. The country's first violence reduction unit. We learn the lessons from Scotland. And she also references in the 2 lines which Sir Tom's given in his report, engagement with health and education partners. I made the point, we're working better than ever before with our partners on the PRU and the Partnership Reference Group. That was the context of the confidence in our plans going forward to address these issues. And what some have sought to do is to cherry pick that in some idea. I gave full confidence to the Commissioner, and that's contradicted because just 2 or 3 months previously, on the 1st of October, I'd used the phrase to the Commissioner, even Sir Tom accepts, last chance saloon for you. Even Sir Tom accepts, I'd spoken to the Home Secretary before this meeting, saying my confidence had been shaken. So what some are seeking to do is to pick out from this meeting an interpretation that isn't borne out by the facts.
Thank you, Mr. So my second question, I think in some ways you already answered this question in response to questions from Assemblyman Pigeon, but I still got to put this to you. And if there's anything more you wish to say, how wide did your thought processes between the January 19th meeting and the 10th of February change? Can you explain to Londoners what actually changed?
Well, so in relation to my confidence overall in the ability of the Commissioner to address the series of scandals that had happened before the 10th of September with the extension, and before that meeting in January, there had then been additional events post that meeting on the 19th of January. By the way, my interpretation of that meeting is not the same as Sir Tom's, mine's where the Home Secretary is, in relation to just those 3 issues have I got confidence in. We're not discussing trust and confidence. And Sir Tom says the omission of trust and confidence from the Home Secretary's letter can be inferred from that, his version of events. What happened after that meeting was, in the words of the minutes, the straw that broke the camel's back. And that's Operation Houghton. The police were well aware of the details of this. I became aware on the 27th of January. By the way, although game-changing in relation to the straw that broke the camel's back, it was still possible for the Commissioner. It was still possible for the Commissioner to persuade me that she had a plan to address these issues, and she had a plan to win back the trust and confidence. And proof of that is you compare and contrast the actions of Dame Cressida, Dick, the finest police officer in a generation, to Sir Mark Rowley in relation to how he's approached these very same issues over the last few weeks.
So, as far as I'm concerned, the all-important issue for Londoners out there is trust and confidence in the police service. So, Mr. Mayor, what assessment have you made of the former and current commissioners, respectively, when it comes to restoring trust and confidence?
And this goes to
looking
the core.
To the future.
This goes to the core of policing, because the current commissioner uses language like higher standards, more trust equals less crime. He believes that the police service should be an anti-racist organisation, which is very different from an organisation that, quote unquote, has a zero tolerance towards racism. I've been at some of the meetings that Sir Mark's been at in relation to his views on addressing these issues, whether it's Charles Q, whether it's Bieber and Nicole, whether it's Sarah Everard, whether it's the Morgan family, whether the 4 victims of Stephen Port, whether it's Bianca Williams. They all deserve a Met Police leadership that understands, that goes to policing by consent, dealing with these issues and having a plan to address them.
And to his credit, Sir Mark Rowley, I would say, is not in a self-denial mode and accept that there are institutional problems within the Met. So my final question, Chair, is to Sir Winsor. So, Sir Winsor, I'm aware of what you said on page 64, paragraph 220 in your report, regarding the departure of the former Commissioner Ian Blair. However, I nonetheless would like to ask you, in this meeting, didn't you think that looking at the resignation of the former Commissioner before the end of his contract and without formal process being involved would have been relevant for your investigation? It would have been helpful, in my opinion, for this committee to understand the differences between the approach of a previous mayor and the current one.
Mr. Johnson, when he was Mayor of London, did not act in accordance with due process in relation to Sir Ian Blair either. And I make that point in my report. 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Thank you.
And that is in the report. I'm sure you've read it, Assembly Member. We're now going to come to Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to start just going back to the issue of feedback on the plan. And paragraphs 90 and 91 show that actually there was some feedback on the plan. Both drafts were sent to the MOPAC CEO during the course of the morning for MOPAC's comment and feedback. Chief of Corporate Services sent a message to follow up, request substantive feedback before calling around 11. During that call, the MOPAC CEO stated that the all-staff message was good. She had not had time to consider the plan carefully, but thought it was too long and would require more external focus, such as a campaign or listening exercise led personally by the Commissioner. Now, there was also, in paragraph 91, the MOPAC CEO also noted the draft plan contained nothing about communication of the outcomes of Baroness Casey's review. She said it was a red line item for the Mayor that the Casey review should report to him directly, even though the Commissioner had established the Casey review on the basis that it would report only to the Commissioner. MOPAC emphasised that the red line was that the review should report to the Mayor in addition to the Commissioner. Now, those are some very clear pieces of feedback. So Tom, I'd just like your response to those in relation to the comments about there not being enough feedback, and then I've got a question for the Mayor as well on this issue.
I didn't say there was no feedback. I was saying that the material feedback came far too late, indeed on the 10th of February, which was the day the Commissioner indicated that her intention to resign.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you think that you or MOPAC should have given more detailed feedback on the Commissioner's plan any earlier?
Well, the Deputy Mayor tried to the day after our meeting. So on the 2nd of February, I met with the Commissioner. On the 3rd of February, the Deputy Mayor met with the Commissioner, and even in Sir Tom's report, he gives some reference to this, Paris 84, where the Deputy Mayor wanted to not deal with the tabled items in the agenda, 3rd of February meeting, and deal with the issue of trust confidence. The Dame Cressida dismissed that idea, spent 5 minutes talking about it. So what was the Deputy Mayor supposed to do? She's raised proactively the issue of wanting to discuss these issues. So Tom's critical about the length of the day. Well, I'm not being funny. The 3rd of February is one day after the 2nd of February. Again, an example of facts being ignored.
You've raised exactly the paragraph that I was going to go to next, which is paragraph 84, and absolutely the Commissioner said there'd been a request that the focus for the meeting should be on trust and confidence, and the Commissioner responded by saying the discussion on trust and confidence should only take 5 minutes. Now, the issue of trust and confidence is absolutely key to the confidence in the Commissioner, both from the Mayor but also from Londoners, because the Mayor mentioned earlier the response of Londoners to this litany, this constant extra revelations of bad things that had been happening in the Metropolitan Police. And that issue of the confidence of Londoners was absolutely critical to all of these events that were going on. So Tom, do you think that it was appropriate to spend just 5 minutes of that meeting on looking at trust and confidence?
I think that the engagement that the Met were having with MOPAC on all these sorts of things was extensive. I expressed no opinion as to whether or not the Commissioner was right to say, I just want to spend a few minutes on this. The Mayor, I think, implied that this was part of feedback on the plan. But this was the 3rd of February. The plan wasn't produced until the 4th of February. So there couldn't be any feedback on the plan if the plan hadn't been sent over. So I think there's a little bit of mixing up there.
Or was it, because, yes, I read it as it was part of an engagement process on the plan.
I have no doubt that the Met took very seriously the matters that the Mayor and his staff were very concerned about.
Do you think that it could be read, the suggestion of only spending 5 minutes on the issue of trust and confidence in this discussion, that the former Commissioner didn't see the extent of the issue with trust and confidence in terms of how Londoners were reacting to the events as they played out. Do you have any comment on that, Sir Tom?
Yes, my answer to your question is no. I don't think there was any blindness on the part of the Commissioner, the then Commissioner, or the senior officers of the Met in relation to the seriousness of these things. That is why they had produced so many action plans, the Stride Plan and others, to deal with the concerns which they shared in relation to the Mayor's agenda in terms of rooting out misogyny, homophobia, racism, and all the other things that were found.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you want to add anything on that point?
Yes. The plan that the then Commissioner Dame Cressida came up with on the 4th of February was simply not good enough for the scale of the challenge facing our police service. Trust and confidence at rock bottom, trust and confidence plummeting over the last couple of years, and the former Commissioner thinking 5 minutes is adequate to discuss these issues, which would have been a really useful meeting for her to use that time in advance of the draft plan she sent to me on Friday the 4th of February. And the Commissioner was aware by as late as the 10th of February that I didn't think that the version on the 4th of February was adequate. But she chose not to come to that meeting and discuss the draft plan with me and work towards it, improving it. I think you can't solve a problem unless you accept there's a problem. And I'll give you the difference, an example of the difference between a, inverted commas, zero tolerance towards racism, which Sir Tom praised in aid for the Met Police Service previously being an anti-racist organisation, and an organisation actually being an anti-racist organisation. An organisation that has zero tolerance towards racism responds to a complaint about racism by dealing with it individually. It could be discipline, it could be performance. An organisation that is anti-racist when it comes to its policies is proactive and makes sure the whole organisation has at its core the importance of weeding out racism. Child Q should not be happening. The response to it could be a zero tolerance towards racism, but the policy of strip searching children and black children in a certain way wouldn't happen in an organisation that's properly anti-racist. The gangs matrix, yes, a useful tool. A zero tolerance, inverted commas, towards racism responds to concerns raised. An anti-racist organisation deals with their core. I'll give you another example. And by the way, the reason why it's important is Sir Tom concludes, because the Met Police Service under Dame Cressida was saying we're zero tolerance, it therefore already was anti-racist. The best example is to be found in Dame Louise Case's interim report. And you'll appreciate, relevant to Sir Tom's report, up until recently, Dame Louise Case wasn't also reporting to me. It was just going to be to Dame Cressida Dick. And what Dame Louise Casey found was that the misconduct processing within the Met Police Service was discriminatory. So if you're a black officer, more likely to face discriminatory action, disciplinary process, than if you're a white officer. Again, you can have a zero tolerance towards racism, but not be an anti-racist organisation. That's why, actually, Sir Tom's report will be examined in months and years to come by academics, by anti-racist campaigners, as an exemplar in some of the problems policing has had over the last 10 years.
Can I just say, my report is not about racism. It's about the conduct of the mayor.
Yep, no, completely. And if all colleagues could remember that, and Mr. Mayor, please too. I know you want to move on to other issues. Can we just stick, please, to what is actually in the report?
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, what I mean is, are you handing it back to me?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, thank you. So, Tom, I think actually the issue of the Met Police and the need for the Met Police to be an anti-racist organisation is absolutely fundamental to these the issues that have been coming out into public through these various events and reports that have been listed at great length already in this meeting, so I won't repeat them. I'd like to actually go now to paragraph 73, because that picks up on the issue of institutional racism and anti-racism. And this was in the meeting on, was this meeting on the 2nd of February, I think, or the 4th, sorry, I haven't got the exact bit highlighted. But towards the end of the Fuller meeting, the Deputy Mayor asked about the Metropolitan Police's position on institutional racism and anti-racism. The Commissioner explained that she did not think the Metropolitan Police was institutionally racist and would not be willing to change that position on the basis of the findings in relation to Operation Houghton. Nonetheless, she was clear that the Metropolitan Police was anti-racist and that she would be and had been very willing to say so. The note records that the Mayor commented that he hadn't previously known that the MPS was an anti-racist organisation. Now, Sir Tom then says it bears noting that the Commissioner had, however, previously made comments to this effect, for example, in a statement dated the 13th of November 2020, when she acknowledged that discrimination and racism were issues that the Metropolitan Police had to contend with, but went on to say, in the Met, we have zero tolerance of racism. My job is to continue to try and eliminate any such racism discrimination, however it appears. Now, Mr. Mayor, that was back in November 2020. Do you think you should have been challenging more sooner?
We were. So I'll give you many examples of how we were challenging sooner. So in the action plan, we were challenging the police in relation to, A, having the community meetings taking place around London, not support originally. We managed to persuade the police to send senior officers. The Commissioner never went to any of those meetings. Compare and contrast, Sir Mark went to Croydon in his first couple of weeks to speak to the community about some of the concerns they had raised. A lot of these are operational matters, and so we've got leniency locus. We asked the Commissioner not just to declare the police anti-racist, but also to ethnically monitor all the vehicle stops you remember a big issue in relation to Banker Williams.
Yeah.
Originally, no, from the police. In the end, they agreed to a limited area of vehicle stops being ethnically monitored. Other examples of pressure being brought on the police is set out in the list I read out in relation to getting the HMI involved, getting the IPC involved, and in relation to challenging the police in relation to many of their decisions. And the point about the straw that broke the camel's back is you've got Operation Hotton, which publishes in black and white examples, not of indirect racism, not of indirect misogyny, not of subtle homophobia, but overt examples of misogyny, racism, sexism, discrimination. And the response of the police is, well, listen, the IPC's looked into this, nothing more we can do. My point was, hold on a sec. How can you expect members of the public to have confidence in our police service when they've been stopped or searched, when they've been asked to ring the police, when they're a victim of crime, when you're not being seen to respond to this way proportionate to the concerns raised? And it's on the back of the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner fully supporting the officers in Bianca Williams, and it's on record what the Deputy Mayor and I thought in relation to that issue. And there are other examples as well. And by the way, there have been many more things brought to light about things happened during the Commissioner's tenure, which I think vindicate the decision I took.
Thank you. Sir Tom, did you want to add anything?
My report is about what the Mayor did in the relevant period, not whether the Met is or is not institutionally racist or anti-racist or zero tolerance in relation to racism and so on. The factual background is as it is. What really matters and what this report is about, my terms of reference did not require me to go and examine whether or not the Met were any good at pretty much anything. They required me to look at the process which was followed and the behaviour of the principal players in this episode. And I think that some of the conversation that's taken place this morning has taken quite a divergent tangent into other matters, which my report is not about. I could talk all day about the performance of the Metropolitan Police. I've been working with these people in detail for 10 years, but that's not what the report's about.
No, that's right. And can I say, I did say this to all of the committee before this meeting. I said it at the beginning of this meeting. We are only dealing with what is in the report. And whilst I know some
Chair,
of you
I
might
have
want
raised
to
these
deviate...
issues.
Chair, these issues are connected.
But we could say everything's connected to everything, but actually we're only here to discuss this report. So if colleagues can please just keep it to the events that are reflected back in this report.
Chair, I do think this is it's absolutely at the crux of how the trust and confidence in the Commissioner was lost, and I do think it is reflected in the report. I keep referencing the paragraphs.
Have you any other questions?
I was just very keen to hear back from the Mayor in response to what Sir Tom said.
Let's be clear. The terms of reference that the former Commissioner gave Sir Tom were establish and assess the full facts, timeline of events, and circumstances which resulted in the stepping down of Dame Cressida as Commissioner. In the timeline of events and key facts are the series of terrible scandals. Now, the fact that Sir Tom's chosen to ignore them speaks volumes.
No. Sir Tom.
I haven't ignored them, and my terms of reference were not given to me by the Commissioner of the Met. They were given to me by the Home Secretary.
Yeah.
I'll make my point. So the Home Secretary is saying to Sir Tom,
no,
establish and assess the full facts. Look at the timeline of events. And the point that you're making, Caroline, is...
Mr Mayor, we are keeping just to what is in the report. We're now going to move over to my next colleague, Assembly Member... I thought you said you'd finished.
I have finished. I have finished.
So there we are. Thank you.
I have finished. But it would have been polite to let the Mayor finish his sentence.
Well, we could be sat here all day talking about things other than the report, which isn't what we're here for. Sorry, Sir Tom.
May I just add?
Sorry, I couldn't finish, but Sir Tom can be brought back in.
Well, because he's only talking about the report.
I'll be very brief. The factual matrix is described in the report, but the factual matrix is relevant to the conduct of the parties and whether the mayor was justified on the 10th of February of communicating through his staff that he was about to make an announcement that he had lost trust and confidence in the commissioner. And the critical period is between the 19th of January and the 10th of February.
It is indeed. Assembly Member Neil Garrett.
Mr. Mayor, did you ask the Commissioner to act unlawfully or outside her powers? No. Sorry, could you switch your microphone on? I believe you've finished getting your drink. Appreciate it, sir. Thirst-inducing conversation. So did you ask the former Commissioner to act unlawfully or outside her powers?
No.
So this is specifically, obviously, in relation to the meeting of the 2nd of February. Did you try to give the impression that you would like her to act unlawfully or outside her powers?
No, I suggested she gets external legal advice rather than relying upon internal advice to see what else she could do.
You didn't try to put pressure on her or get anyone in your team to put pressure on her to act in a way which you obviously would know would not be within her powers.
No, and the minutes that were taken, which you know, don't say that either.
So this, I mean, this is in connection to the request to dismiss officers. So there are a number of officers who were flagged as part of the Operation Houghton investigation, and the Commissioner's recollection is that you just wanted her to fire the lot of them.
So you've got my version of events.
Well, I'm putting it to you, so you have an opportunity to respond. Yeah.
You've got my version of events, the Chief of Staff's version of events, the Deputy Mayor's version of events. You've got the minutes, and then you've got Dame Cressida and Sir Tom's version of events. Mine are different to theirs.
Right, this is why I'm now asking you the question, is that what happened? So that's what the Commissioner thinks happened. She got the impression that you wanted her just to sack all of those officers. And is that not what happened?
No, I thought I'd answer that question, but
you haven't answered the question. You answered by just quoting the fact that there are lots of versions of events. So I'm asking you specifically about what your version of events. So did you make any requests in relation to getting rid of those officers, including, I mean, as you would know, some of those officers had already been through a process with the IOPC and had already been cleared?
What I've said publicly and to Dame Cressida is the public could not understand why some officers have been promoted, many officers were still serving, and she'd accepted the IOPC's version of events. I'd suggested that she gets legal advice, external legal advice, in relation to the position. There probably are two conclusions that have been reached. The legal advice would have said, actually, Dame Cressida, there's nothing else you can do. And that would be a virtue in relation to the Commissioner showing she's trying her best to address serious issues. The second thing the legal advice may have come back with is actually there are things you can do to, in relation to that. Dame Cressida was not minded to get that external legal advice, and that's one of the things I was suggesting she should do.
But even in public, though, your public comments are that all of those officers, people can't, I think your quote was, no, the public can't understand why any of those officers are still there. But surely you knew that some of those officers had been investigated and cleared.
No, the public couldn't understand. The public still can't understand.
But you knew that some of them had been investigated and cleared. So what did you think should happen with those officers?
Well, no, that's upon legal advice. Because I've given you two examples. On Child Q,
sorry,
the IPC said...
No. Some of those officers, you surely knew this at the time and you certainly know it now. Some of those officers had already been investigated by the IOPC and had already been cleared or found no case to answer. What did you think should happen with those officers?
Well, no, all we had was the IOPC report. My point being is, what the Commissioner should be doing is to give confidence to the public about the way the police are policed. That's part of the...
sacking officers who've been cleared? Because that's what she thinks you wanted her to do.
Those are your words, not mine.
I'm putting them to you because you're not really answering, you're not engaging with the point that I'm making. Some of those officers, we assume, have been involved in serious wrongdoing and need to be investigated. I think all of us in this room would share the idea that unfit officers need to be removed, but you can't just sack people who have been found to have done nothing wrong. The Commissioner's view is that that's what you wanted her to do.
Well, let's be clear.
So what do you think should happen specifically with those officers whose name came up in relation to that investigation, but who had been investigated and cleared?
Let's be clear. I don't agree with you when you say those officers have done nothing wrong. So we disagree there, and I think London is with me, not with you.
So when the IOPC cleared them, you think they were wrongly cleared?
Well, your words were, those officers have done nothing wrong. My view is those officers have done something wrong. They've used racist, sexist,
No,
misogynistic
hang on, now you're
language.
putting words in my mouth. Clearly some wrong things were done by some officers, not all officers. The purpose of due process is to find out which people had done something wrong and then discipline them, including, I think in many of those cases, just removing them from the Met. Other people, they may be wrongly accused. So if those officers have been investigated and cleared, what should happen? They should just be fired? They should just have a shadow of guilt cast on them?
So am I dealing with the hypothetical or the Dame Cressida point?
So let's check the facts. So in your view, were some of the officers who were implicated in the Operation Houghton investigation, were any of those officers cleared of wrongdoing?
So in the IPC process, yes. My point is that no external advice was sought about whether there were other avenues or options open to the Met Police Service.
So is your view that the IOPC reached a wrong conclusion in relation to some of those officers?
In this particular case, I don't know. In the past, they have.
You seem to be implying it. That's what I'm trying to understand.
My point is you've got to test it. You don't just take at face value what you're given. So an example is the IOPC said to me, said to the public, the officers in child Q should be investigated for conduct, not gross
I'm asking
misconduct.
about Houghton,
No. So I'm giving you an example
Yes.
where IOPC do get things wrong, and there are other examples as well. My point to the Commissioner in this particular case was, have you sought to test it? Have you got external advice? Or why don't you get external advice?
But your motive in suggesting that was presumably that you thought that all of those officers should be got rid of, including the ones that the IOPC had cleared.
Well, no, it would address the question the public had about how is it the case that none of these officers, beg your pardon, except for the two that you referred to, the other officers either have been promoted or are still serving.
So, Tom, obviously in your report you reach a slightly different conclusion from the one presented to us by the Mayor just now. So what were your reasons for reaching the conclusion that the Mayor had just tried to have all those officers fired?
I don't reach slightly different conclusions. I reach the opposite conclusions. If I've understood the Mayor correctly in his answer a moment ago, he appears to be thinking that once a quasi-judicial, disciplinary, or even criminal investigation process has found someone with no case to answer, or has imposed a mild sanction having regard to all the facts, a politician should overrule the judicial process and impose his own sanction. That happens in other countries. It doesn't happen in the UK. I'm not surprised the Met didn't want to take external legal advice. They have actually very good internal legal advice, but I don't think the Commissioner probably needed any tuition in the fact that if there was to be a judicial review of the individual decisions of the IOPC in these investigations, the time for applying for judicial review had long passed, because you've got to bring the proceedings within 90 days. And anyone knows that. The Mayor, in his public statements, has given the impression that, in some respects, perhaps to some people, that all 14 officers were guilty. They weren't. There were 2 who did things which which merited their dismissal. One of them was dismissed, the other one resigned before he could be dismissed, and they were both put on the barred list, so they're not coming back. The others had proportionate sanctions applied according to the individual circumstances of their case. That is a fair process, and it is not for politicians to come in and just change the result. As far as the Mayor's your questions about the Mayor requiring or insisting or applying pressure to the Commissioner to act unlawfully, my findings are that's exactly what he did. And the Commissioner ignores in his answer, perhaps he overlooked it, that after the Baby P circumstances were mentioned in the one-to-one meeting between Dame Cressida and the Mayor said it again in front of other people, including Assistant Commissioner Helen Ball. Now, I interviewed her extensively, as well as Cressida Dick, and they both have the clearest possible recollection. That is exactly what he said. And I give the analysis in detail in paragraph 77 as to why, given that there is a material difference on a fact, a very critical fact, why I preferred the evidence of the former commissioner and the former assistant commissioner over that of the mayor. The mayor said in an interview to me on the 17th of August, yes, the Ed Balls, meaning the Baby P case, that was discussed in the one-to-one meeting, but he couldn't remember who raised it. Why on earth would Cressida Dick raise that? And there are other factors in paragraph 77 in detail where I explain why this material difference of fact came down in favour of the evidence of the former commissioner and the former assistant commissioner. And it is not appropriate for the mayor to put up some kind of smokescreen in relation to other things if that is what he's trying to do.
Thank you, Sir Tom. So, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I think that's the issue that I have, or the concern that I have about this meeting is that if you have political interference with due process, firstly, it obviously undermines due process, and secondly, sticking with our common goal of removing unfit officers while building confidence not just of the public in the police, but of the police in their ability to do their job and having support for the difficult work they do. If officers feel that they're likely facing a double jeopardy where they're wrongly accused and then they're cleared, and then the mayor wades in implying or saying publicly that they should all just be sacked, do you see there's a problem with that? Do you recognise, firstly, that interferes with the process?
I don't recognise that version of events that Sir Tom's highlighted, no. So I've put to you repeatedly just now about what you think should happen with those officers who were investigated and cleared, and you've really refused to answer that question. So here's a final go. What should happen, in your view, with those officers who've been properly investigated and cleared? What the Commissioner should have done was to get legal advice.
But what do you think should happen with those officers? Not what she should do. What do you think should happen with those officers?
I think we should get legal advice as to what options are open to us in relation to those officers.
But why? Why would you need legal advice?
Because,
on what point?
Because you're working on the basis, as Sir Tom says, that everything that has been explored can be explored.
But
I'm saying there may be scenarios
I don't
where
understand your answer other than if the thought in your head... So I can't understand why you would say what you're saying unless you think that those officers actually do still need to be disciplined.
Well, no. All I've got to go on is all I've got to go on is the report I saw, the learning report. My point being is that I've not looked at, I'm not practicing law anymore, all the evidence that the IPC had. I've not looked at the work the MPS did with the IOPC. I've not looked at whether the evidence, for example, could have justified action against other officers who weren't disciplined. You mentioned, which is impressive, double jeopardy. Double jeopardy only applies if an officer has been through the disciplinary process in a criminal process. In relation to that case, we don't have officers. Did all go through the process. At the time, I didn't know the 14 officers. So, for example, of the 14 officers on the WhatsApp group, for argument's sake, let's say 6 officers went through the disciplinary process, the other 6 weren't. It's open for those 6 officers who didn't go through it to be looked at in relation to a disciplinary process.
You keep changing the subject away from the 2 who were investigated and were cleared.
You asked me a question, I gave you the answer.
The two who were investigated and were cleared, I mean, whatever you knew at the time, you know that now. So sitting here now, what do you think should have happened to those 2 officers?
Well, I didn't see all the evidence. That's my point about the Commissioner, what the Commissioner should...
Sitting here now, what do you think should happen to those officers who've been investigated and cleared?
Well, no, I've not seen the evidence sitting here now. What the Commissioner should be doing is looking at all the evidence as the Chief Constable in relation to, look, this is a serious issue. Serious issues have been raised. I've been given a report from Assistant Commissioner Helen Ball. I want to test this. I want to see what's possible, what more can be done. Am I satisfied that all that can be done has been done? If I am, make a virtue of that. If I'm not, see what else can be done.
So the claim that you just basically wanted her to get rid of all of those officers, that's not true?
That's not true.
OK, moving forward about a week, so that was the 2nd of February, we moved forward about a week to the 10th of February when things sort of reached a climax. Why did you only give the Commissioner about 30 minutes to decide whether to resign?
Not true.
You didn't give her 30 minutes?
No.
She seems to think that you did give her about 30 minutes to choose to either resign or... I don't know what you thought she should do in that time.
I don't agree with Sir Tom's recollection of events or Dame Cressida's.
I haven't said 30 minutes. It's 4 hours.
4 hours. So Sir Tom, so clarify. So on the events of the 10th, so if you could clarify what was the sequence of events on the 10th. So clarify briefly.
Well, they're in the report. They're in the report. So
yes.
During the course of the 10th of February, and remember the former commissioner went on BBC Radio London saying, I'm staying, I'm not going anywhere. But the pressure built through the day. The mayor, through his staff, was applying that pressure. And in the about 11:30 in the morning, the possibility, indeed the pressure in relation to her being losing her job was applied. And then in the late afternoon, about 5 p.m. and so on, she was given an hour to decide. The conversation took almost half an hour, so that was extended by a further 30 minutes. But an ultimatum was received in her mind, and she felt that she had to go. It wasn't 30 minutes, but it wasn't very long.
So do you dispute that version of events, Mr. Mayor, the events of the 10th?
Well, some I don't disagree with, some I do disagree with.
So the general picture is over the course of that day, either you directly or indirectly through your team put increasing pressure on the former commissioner that she just needed to resign.
No,
you don't recognise that series of events.
No, I didn't understand then, and I still don't understand now, why Dame Cressida didn't come to our meeting. I mean, the point of the meeting was to discuss the plan. It was a regular bilateral meeting. What I've subsequently discovered is there was a bunker mentality in and around the commissioner, and so they were becoming entrenched in a view of events. By the way, we had no external counsel present. I had nobody else present in our office. We'd expected a normal meeting to take place, and my assessment is the advisors she had, whether it's the lawyers or the chief constable or so forth, you got into a sort of spiral of believing there was some sort of other agenda. We weren't going to invoke the statute. I was going to invoke the statute process because I was going to see her at 4 o'clock. But the plan that she'd sent to me on the Friday wasn't good enough. My office had let her know it wasn't good enough. And so the idea of the meeting was us to work through what more needs to happen. And what Sir Tom's alluding to is the fact that if the Commissioner wasn't going to come to the meeting, if she had nothing else to add to her plan, then that plan didn't address the issues I had, which is relevant to the timeline of events and the key facts in relation to the series of scandals that Caroline Russell has spoken about. Yeah. And if that was all she had to respond to these series of scandals, including Operation Houghton, I would then lose confidence with her and she'd go.
But the plan, just on that timeline which you mentioned in the plan, so the former commissioner sent you her plan to deal with those issues on the 4th, and you sent her no feedback up until the point that she resigned on the 10th or morning of the 11th. So because you said you tried to suggest to us earlier that you had, but Sir Tom suggests that what you were claiming was the feedback, in actual fact, had happened the day before.
So there's a number of different things. So there's a meeting on the 2nd.
Sorry, I don't want to rehash everything because we don't have infinite time. So from the 4th, you received her plan. What feedback did you give to the former commissioner on her plan?
That's what we were going to discuss at the meeting on the 10th of February.
Ahead of that meeting, you'd sent her nothing?
No, because we're meeting on the 10th of February.
Okay, but I mean, when I have meetings with people to discuss an important plan, I would tell them ahead of time the sort of thing I'm likely to bring up so they can prepare. Sounds more like an ambush.
Well, no, there have been other occasions where we've discussed a plan in detail when we meet. Charing Cross is the straw that the camel's back. But look at the Clapham Common incident in relation to us meeting, again, a big event. Another example, big event that we met and agreed things, the action plan after George Floyd's murder. And there are other examples. So the idea was she'd come along on the 10th of February, we'd discuss her plan and a way forward.
But you didn't, not even a note. I mean, you managed to come up with 30 pages of notes to Sir Tom. You didn't come up with even half a paragraph of a note to the Commissioner or to her team about what you thought the deficiencies were for her plan, so that at that meeting she'd be prepared to respond.
Well, no, the Commissioner was aware of my views from the 2nd of February, and the purpose of the 10th of February meeting was to discuss a way forward in relation to how we can address the issues that have been highlighted by the scandals, but also we met trust and confidence. That was the purpose of the meeting.
But already before the meeting hadn't happened, you were suggesting that you may not have confidence in her. Is that not right in the radio programme that morning on BBC
I was quite clear.
Radio
I was quite clear that we were going to work on a plan. I deliberately hadn't told the media when I was meeting the Commissioner because I didn't want the ambush you referred to. And the idea was she'd come and see me and talk through her plan. But what she was aware of, I didn't want to embarrass the Commissioner by saying, for example, look, she sent me a plan, it's not good enough. And so to protect her, I was saying, look, the Commissioner's going to come and see me, we'll discuss a way to address these issues. And so she was aware of the importance of the plan. In fact, she was aware the day before she sent me the plan because the Deputy Mayor had said to her on the 3rd of February, which she closed down, we should discuss issues around trust and confidence.
So your view, this was an ongoing dialogue, but her failure to attend the meeting on the 10th was what then precipitated, in your view, the fact that she could no longer continue? Yeah, because if on the 10th of February she's not coming to meet with me and she's saying her plan is a fait accompli, that's not good enough. Okay. So Tom, so why is it you think that the former Commissioner reached the view that she was being pressured out rather than just having this ongoing dialogue as the Mayor describes?
Well, I've explained in extenso the darkening atmosphere, the increasing pressure, and I think that the Commissioner thought that if she went to the 4 o'clock meeting on the 10th, she would be humiliated, that there was no reasonable prospect of a constructive dialogue. That's the way she put it to me. Now, I have said in my report, I think she should have gone to the meeting. I think you've all read that. I think she should have gone. I think that was consistent with her obligations under the policing protocol, and it was a mistake on her part. However, this was an extremely pressurized and difficult situation for her, and she was entitled to reach the view that the Mayor really didn't want constructive dialogue. That was her view. And this was an opportunity for something other than that to happen. In other words, she would be humiliated, and she would leave City Hall probably going through a press pack. I simply don't know. And she felt that the dignity of the office of the Commissioner and indeed the morale of the Metropolitan Police would not be well served by that kind of thing. Now, it didn't happen. She didn't go to the meeting, and therefore there was no overt behaviour of the kind that I've suggested might have happened.
Okay, so I understand that's speculative, though.
Yes, well, that's what she thought. That's what she told me she thought. But she should have gone to the meeting because the policing protocol requires both parties to engage in the way that is stated in paragraph 8 of the protocol. And in my report, I have found that both the Mayor and the Commissioner failed in some of their obligations under the policing protocol. I criticise both of them.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, is it your view that the former Commissioner resigned, or that she was sacked, or that she was constructively dismissed? Or what was the nature of her departure, in your view? My view is she resigned. So you don't accept any characterisation of anything? I mean, I realise she's not an employee, but any characterisation along the lines of constructive dismissal you completely reject? I do. And this came up earlier. I'd just like to return to this question about your office sort of negotiating terms of her departure. So did I hear correctly earlier that you were not aware that that was going on? No, I wasn't aware. There were conversations taking place between my staff. I mean, where subsequently, but in real time, I'm assuming I'm meeting the Commissioner at 4 o'clock. There are other conversations taking place in relation to trying to encourage her to come to the meeting. I'm not sure who suggested. I'm not criticising her side either. I'm not suggesting. I'm not aware who suggested the without prejudice terms you referred to. I wasn't told the detail. So what is it? So do you imply to your team, suggested to your team, hinted to your team that this might be something that would need with your approval? Yeah, I'm not sure if I get this from Sir Tom's report or elsewhere. I think Robin Wilkinson and my Chief of Staff were speaking, and it may have been suggested, how to deal with the issue of what happens if she does resign. I simply, in real time, wasn't aware of that. Only subsequently became aware of that, so it's unfair. So your Chief of Staff was sort of, riffing, freelancing? What was he doing? That is not what I said. I'm asking you to try to clarify. So you know nothing about it, but he's doing it. I mean, on this committee and others, we engaged with him a number of times. He doesn't seem like someone who wings it. You're putting to me a version of events for Sir Tom's report. Okay. What I'm saying to you in response is, in real time, I wasn't aware of the events in Sir Tom's report. So sitting here now, can you think why it would be that your Chief of Staff would appear to be doing that? No, I can understand why those representing the former Commissioner were trying to deal with an exit for the Commissioner, in the words of Sir Tom, that gave her dignity. One of the things they may have suggested that gave her dignity
was a settlement for her to leave. What I'm saying to you is, in real time, my focus was the 4 o'clock meeting, and I assumed that she'd come to that meeting.
Sorry, so you're suggesting it was the Commissioner's office who suggested a settlement, not your office?
Well, my office had no legal representation. Her office had a senior partner from a law firm, a chief constable, a deputy chief constable,
but I wasn't
the
asking
deputy
about
commissioner.
the
Well,
staffing.
I'm answering your question. There's only
maybe.
one side that's got legal representation, one side who's clearly war-gamed an exit, and that's not the mayor's side.
I don't think I would need legal representation, though, to know that it would be outside the bounds of the Mayor's office to start negotiating departure terms with someone who isn't even an employee of City Hall.
You're suggesting that the chief of staff was acting on a freelance basis. What I'm saying in response is there
Well,
wasn't...
I'm asking. To be fair, I'd put to you whether you knew or whether you'd asked him. That's my starting point, is to assume that he doesn't wing it. He doesn't seem like a winger to me. He seems like a very deliberate man who's very careful and methodical.
He's a brilliant man who's always impartial and methodical and fair.
I don't know that he's always
The sort-
impartial. I'll agree with you that he's very talented.
I think I agree with you there as well, to be fair. The point I'm saying to you is, in real time, I wasn't involved in those negotiations. That was your question. Were you aware? And I wasn't aware in real time. I think I've said it 4 times, to be fair to me.
And is that something that surprises you that might have been going on, or was it something you would have approved of if you had
No,
known?
subsequently I discovered, and by the way, what Sir Tom didn't say was, in his previous report, he did say that all these people were listening to the conversations. He then corrected himself in the final report. The position is that I wasn't aware that, for example, Dame Cressida had a senior partner from a law firm with her. I wasn't aware that she'd called the Chief Constable from Kent to be with her, the Deputy Chief Constable. I wasn't aware that Deputy Commissioner Steve House was in the room, or Robin Wilkinson. All that I became aware afterwards when I read the first draft of Sir Tom's report.
So, in terms of this sort of exit deal, are you aware that she ended up getting an exit deal? Because what you've spoken about is process, but what actually happened was politics and media, wasn't it? It wasn't that the actual process wasn't used. It was media. It was politics.
I'm quite clear. The process on the 10th of February was fair. I'm quite clear that we did nothing wrong in City Hall or the Mayor's Office of Policing and Crime. I'm quite clear the statutory process was not invoked. Sir Tom spends a lot of time in relation to his report and the meeting with me talking about the South Yorkshire case, very different to the case with the Met Police Service. I'm quite clear there is a convention referred to by one of the colleagues on the committee in relation to a former mayor losing confidence with a former commissioner. I went above and beyond what Boris Johnson and Sir Ian Blair had, which is the opportunity for this commissioner to come up with an improvement plan, for this commissioner to meet with me before I even got to invoking the statutory process. But if your thesis is right, and if Sir Tom's thesis is right, it's never possible for a mayor to lose confidence with his or her commissioner unless he or she invokes the statutory process. That could not have been the intention of Parliament.
To be fair, that's not my thesis. I'm trying to find out what happened. So in the end, then, your view is that perfectly proper discussions took place, at the end of which the Commissioner chose to resign.
Absolutely.
And so, presumably, since she resigned entirely of her free will, there was no package or deal that went with that.
Well, no, don't forget, I can't go into details unless the Commissioner allows me, the former Commissioner allows me to do so, but don't forget, she had a 2-year contract, and you don't resign summarily, as you know. And so there would have been discussions, which, Chair, I think we probably don't want to go into details in this meeting, but I'm happy to, if Dame Cressida allows me to do so, in relation to the package. But let's be clear, and this is a big point that Sir Tom makes in his report. She has a 2-year extension of her contract from April. What I can share with this room is what I can share with this room, because you've asked the question, is she did not get 2 years' salary.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, I'm first of all mindful that Tollgate Primary School from Newham have joined us, so thank you. But also you've joined us when we're just about to take a comfort break. I'm sorry it's gone on longer than I had hoped. It'll be a 10-minute... no, it's me. I should have come in with this before yours. It's 10 minutes, so 12:25 we'll resume. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now resume this meeting. I want to bring you in, Sir Tom, but first, can I just get it straight in my mind then, Mr. Mayor? You are saying you don't believe, or the Commissioner, when she told Sir Tom that you asked her to sack those officers. You're saying that's incorrect?
Correct.
Okay, fine. I'm very concerned. I mean, this to me is one of the very biggest things in the report that worries and concerns certainly me the most. I mean, most of it does, but this in particular. And there's reference to baby P that I have great concerns of. Can I ask you, first of all, Sir Tom, to respond to any answers that the Mayor gave to my colleague, Assemblymember Garrett? And you said that you referred to the case of Peter Connolly, baby P, saying that the Commissioner should act as the Secretary of State for Children's Schools and Families, and that, of course, was to do with Ed Balls, and as he had done in that case, regardless of the consequences of the civil law. Can you just reference that, Sir Tom, and tell us what the Commissioner said?
Well, I don't have much to add to what's in the report, which goes into that matter quite extensively, because I think it was one of the major events in this episode. But there was, as I'm just summarising what's already in the report, there was a one-to-one meeting between the Mayor and the former Commissioner, at which, according to Dame Cressida, the Mayor raised the baby P case, and he said that the Commissioner should act as Ed Balls, the then Secretary of State, had done in that case, regardless of the consequences of the civil law. The Mayor, knew that Ed Balls or his department had to make a large financial settlement to Sharon Shoesmith, who was dismissed as a result afterwards, but he said that didn't matter because the public would understand if the Commissioner sacked the officers. And the Commissioner came back and said, I have no power to sack these officers, and what would it do to the morale of the Metropolitan Police if the Commissioner unlawfully dismisses officers, some of whom have no case to answer or who were given milder sanctions, purely as a result of political pressure? And her evidence was that the Commissioner said, you should do that. And he applied that degree of pressure. The Commissioner correctly resisted this entreaty to do as Ed Balls had done. This was in the one-to-one meeting, but in interview with me on the 17th of August, the Mayor said, well, if he had really said what I've just said in relation to the Ed Balls baby P case, then surely he would have mentioned it, and it would have been mentioned when other people came into the room. Well, that's exactly what happened, because Assistant Commissioner Helen Ball recalls exactly what Cressida Dick said had happened. Sophie Linden said that she remembered that the Ed Balls case had been mentioned. David Bellamy said he had no recollection of this at all, which is why he didn't put it in the note. My view is that Mr. Bellamy is hardly likely to put in the official note of a meeting actions which, on the part of the Mayor, which could, and in my view do, amount to unlawful conduct. It's hardly likely to put that in the note, and I do not regard the note of that meeting as a complete or accurate account of what was said. The Mayor has said that that's the only note of the meeting, but it's not. The Met made a note too, and I have read that note. And I've asked the Assistant Commissioner Helen Ball and former Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick about that meeting at length. The Mayor's reaction to me in the 17th of August meeting was that he remembered it was raised, but he couldn't remember who raised it. Well, it's hardly likely that Cressida Dick raised it. Anyway, in paragraph 77 of my report, I give a very detailed account of why I preferred the evidence of Cressida Dick and Helen Ball over that of the Mayor.
Yeah.
And that note of the meeting is a 20-page note of my interview with the Mayor on the 17th of August, which has been agreed with MOPAC.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you want to comment?
In the words of Sir Tom, the way to test evidence is to ask the witness. So the best way for you to assess whether my version of events is correct or Dame Cressida Dick's, bearing in mind the difference, is for you to ask her. She's not here, I am. Similarly, in relation to
You
Sir
might have
Tom's
to
words,
brace yourself for another summons, Mr. Mayor. You're almost inviting yourself to another meeting.
I can't think of anything better to do with my
I
time.
know, me too.
The reality
And
is
also-
the evidence was
with respect,
tested.
with respect, the other point that Sir Tom gives a lot of credence to is the meeting with the Home Secretary. Bearing in mind that I've pointed to the section in Sir Tom's report where he quotes the letter from the Home Secretary, which is consistent with mine. Again, the person that could confirm that meeting, and the only live witness present is me, is the former Home Secretary. Again, she's not here either. And it goes to the point about the conclusions that Sir Tom's reached and my concerns about them.
And they were both asked to come.
Hang on, excuse me. Sir Tom, did you want to come back to that?
I apologise to the Mayor for interrupting him. The evidence was tested in a 22-week-long investigation with the evaluation of evidence, the establishment, the examination and assessment of contemporaneous documents, other written material, and oral evidence. This committee session, I suggest, is not a rehearing of an investigation. The investigation was meticulous and thorough, and the report is before you. The Mayor only gave me 90 minutes. I would like to have had a lot longer with him and with him on his own, together with the other people present. But that opportunity was not given to me. I had no powers of compulsion. When I was appointed by the Home Office to do this report, my immediate reaction was, are you going to give me statutory powers? And they said, no, we're quite confident that the Mayor and his staff will cooperate fully. They were wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, at this point, David Perry comes up in the report, who you took advice from. Why would you have taken advice from David Perry? He's mentioned in the report.
David Perry is probably the leading criminal barrister in England.
Okay, thank you. Assembly Member Prince.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Most of the questions I was going to ask have already been covered, so I'll try and keep it tight and just refer to mainly comments made by my colleague, Assembly Member Garrett. So if we can just get back to where we were there. So you said in answer to one of my colleague's questions that, and I'm paraphrasing, but you can use the exact word used, that you were unaware of the conversations that your Chief of Staff was having with the Chief of Corporate Services in regards to a possible settlement on the 10th of February. Did I get that correct? You said you were unaware of those conversations.
No, what I said was I'm aware conversations were taking place, but in real time I was looking forward to the meeting at 4 p.m, not negotiating with the Commissioner.
Right. So, so you're saying you were aware that your Chief of Staff was making offers to the Commissioner via the Chief of Corporate Services?
No, that's not what I said.
Conversations, I'm asking you to clarify.
Conversations were taking place, I was aware of at the time. I wasn't at the time either in the room with David Bellamy or aware of what was being discussed. Subsequently, after the Commissioner said she wasn't coming, she was going to be resigning that day, so forth, I became more aware of those situations because I assumed
she was going to
4 o'clock, then 5 o'clock meeting was taking place.
Of course. So when Mr. Bellamy was making the offer of a 6-month salary settlement, you were not aware of that?
Look at the statement from Dame Cressida Dick on the day. One of the reasons why she said she'd stay on, even though she's resigning, was to support us in the transition, obviously. but also for these sorts of issues to be resolved. What I was aware of, I'm not sure if it's at that precise time, but or later on that evening, was the issue of her pension. I knew there was a technical issue with the pension and stuff. I can't tell you if it was at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock or afterwards, because it was a fast-moving day.
Yeah. Okay. So when it was allegedly said that, I'm saying alleged because I wasn't there either, when Mr. Bellamy allegedly said that the mayor would be willing to pay her 6 months' salary and this was not open to negotiation, you were unaware of that offer that the Chief of Staff was making to the Commissioner?
At that precise time, no, because I was doing other stuff, looking forward to meeting her at 4 o'clock.
It's a good point here, actually. So I agree you may well not have been aware he was having that conversation, but had you authorised him to have that conversation at some point?
On 6 months?
Yeah.
No.
So when he said the mayor would be willing to pay her 6 months' salary,
but
and
with
that
respect, you're putting to me a version of events that I'm not even sure David Bellamy agrees with. So it's like third-hand hearsay.
Well, I'm going to ask Sir Tom in a minute, because I understand that he doesn't dispute that. But I'm just trying to get to the bottom of the fact that if he did say that he would be willing to pay 6 months' salary and that was not open to negotiation, you hadn't authorised him to make that offer?
No, not at the time.
Okay, fine. So could I, at that point, then bring in you, Sir Tom, because I understand that there is no dispute over this, but I might have misread what you said in your report.
Well, that's the evidence that I obtained predominantly from Dame Cressida Dick, her supporters in the Chief Police Officers Staff Association and others, and I do not believe that it has been disputed by Mr. Bellamy.
Can I just refer you to paragraph 142 on page 42, which leads with, the Mayor's Chief of Staff does not materially dispute this account of the telephone call.
Mm-hmm.
And in your statement there, I assume that's your statement, and it's literally 2 paragraphs after the one I've just been laboriously reading out. In that 142 statement, are you referring to the comments made in paragraph 140?
Well, where I say the Mayor's Chief of Staff does not materially dispute this account of the telephone call, that relates to the conversation, the telephone call immediately preceding that paragraph.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. So a lot of this really seems to come around the fact that there was this sense of urgency being communicated by the Mayor's office of Dame Cressida having to make some decisions around whether or not she was going to resign. I just want to get some clarification from you, Mr. Mayor. Had you predetermined what the outcome of the meeting on the 10th of February was going to be?
No, definitely not.
Okay. Had you, I think you've already answered this, but had you previously communicated to the Commissioner your dissatisfaction with the 16-point plan that she handed to you on the 4th of February, I believe, and the areas that you were not happy with? Had you previously communicated that?
So on the Monday and the Tuesday, she was made aware by my office that the plan that had been sent on the Friday wasn't good enough. We didn't go into detail. That was the point of the 10th of February meeting, for us to go into issues around the plan.
Is it fair to say, though, that you, Mr. Mayor, had decided that if you were not happy with what she proposed had she made the meeting on the 10th, that you were in a position where you'd lost confidence?
Yeah, let me be clear with this. So if it's the case that all Dame Cressida was offering was the letter on that Friday, nothing else. If it was the case that, as happened, she didn't come to the meeting on the 10th of February, so that's all there was, or if it's the case in our meeting on the 10th of February, there weren't additional things to address the 2 issues, series of scandals, how we address that, how we address trust and confidence, that I would have reached the conclusion that I no longer had confidence in the Commissioner. What happens then is the statutory process it comes into play, and that's when I suspect it's hypothetical, the Chief Executive of MOPAC may have rung up the Chief Inspector's Office, Home Secretary and so forth, and there's that process of you make representations, the Commissioner responds, we take the view of the Chief Inspector, take the view of the Home Secretary, as happened in the case of South Yorkshire, as didn't happen in the case of Sir Ian Blair and Boris Johnson.
But you are saying to us today that had the Commissioner turned up on the 10th and made a convincing argument that you would not have felt that you could have been persuaded not to dismiss it or not to lose confidence.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I've been criticised for supporting the Dame Cressida in the past, including by members of this assembly. Right, so I'm on record as supporting her because it's the right thing to do, and I did support her. But I was quite clear, and it's in the minute that Sir Tom doesn't give much weight to, of the 2nd of February, that Houghton was the straw that brought the camel's back in relation to what she was doing to address these issues. I've already listed the things I did in advance of the extension and after her extension, whether it's the IPC, whether it's HMI,
where are those,
other things as well. And so it was really important for her to reassure me that she could address those issues.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point you make about things happened after the extension. So we have a situation where you were open. Let's say you were open-minded about it. That you probably weren't very satisfied, but you were open to being persuaded. But what I can't understand, and I don't think Sir Tom can understand it, and my colleagues, why was there a need? Why was it? Because this is what was emphasised continually by your Chief of Staff. Why was there a need for you to make an announcement on the 10th? Could you not have had that meeting and then thought about it? Could you have not had that meeting and perhaps had a further meeting? Or why was there this urgency to have an announcement on the 10th?
A number of reasons why. So on recent days, everything that either the Commissioner had done or I had done had been subsumed by a vast majority of Londoners being unhappy and angry with her and her response. I'd gone to the Evelyn Children's Hospital on an air quality visit, and all the issues raised afterwards, not on air quality, were about the performance of the Met Police Service and its leadership. I'd gone on to do media in relation to a mentoring scheme, and a lot of the questions weren't about the mentoring scheme, were about the Met Police Service's performance and the failure of leadership at the top. Dame Cressida Dick had gone on a BBC Radio London phoning programme to talk about policing issues, and even Sir Tom accepts this in his report, and it had been taken over by Londoners ringing in and unhappy with her and the Met Police Service. So everything we were doing, operationally as far as the Commissioner was concerned, me as Mayor were concerned, were taken up by these issues. But I'd made it clear in relation to my response to those very serious questions about the series of scandals culminating in Houghton. We had to give the Commissioner the opportunity to respond because the Commissioner had not been doing, for example, the Today programme or the Sunday shows. And so, people were asking what is her response to this. And so what I'd said, to be fair to the Commissioner, is, look, the Commissioner's got to have a chance to come and see me and let me know what her response is to this. I'm not going to say I've lost confidence with her before giving her the opportunity to respond, even though she'd responded on the Friday before the Monday I did the media on mentoring, and I wasn't happy with her response. I didn't want to write her off, and that's further evidence of my open mind, because being generous to her, if the letter on the 4th of February is a draft plan, she has the opportunity to come to see me on the 10th of February and expand on it and improve it and understand that she understands these issues. And that's why I'm surprised she didn't come. But we couldn't carry on, because the next question would be, whenever I did any visit, could be in transport, could be housed and whatever, is now that you've met the Commissioner, what's your response in relation to whether you've got confidence in her ability to do so? And the only response I could give, her not turning up to a meeting on a bilateral, it shows we're not working properly, which is important. The 4th of February letter being the only response she had is I didn't have confidence in her ability to address these serious issues.
Thank you, Mr. Burt. But you did actually, did you not, on the 2nd of February, do a media interview? This is on page 58199. You did put the Commissioner on. You did publicly say you'd put the Commissioner on notice. So it kind of suggests that you already had a lot of doubts and
the minutes confirm.
Yeah, okay.
I thought it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and so it was the culmination of those things, and she wasn't noticed
you've
to
said
come
that,
with a proper plan.
Okay, so can I just put it to you then, Mr. Mayor? Do you think it is fair and reasonable to have put the Commissioner under the amount of pressure that she was put under on that day by your Chief of Staff to suggest that if she turned up and didn't satisfy you, that you would make the announcement that she would be you'd have lost her confidence? Do you think that is fair and equitable and reasonable, Mr. Mayor?
It is. I see why it is. So the Chief of Staff, MOPAC staff, the Deputy Mayor, myself have gone over and above what a previous Mayor did with Sir Ian Blair. Sir Ian Blair given no chance to come up with a response as we've given the Commissioner. But this Commissioner is not just the most senior police officer in the country, a trained hostage negotiator, somebody who's got huge experience in the police service. She's got serious issues facing our city in relation to Charing Cross, in relation to the Equities, in relation to
interested in the process.
Well, no,
but you've
answered these are serious issues, and
if
you can't deal with these issues, you're not fit to be the Commissioner.
Okay, fine. So can I just ask you then, Sir Tom, do you feel that approach was fair and equitable? And
no, I thought it was an abuse of power. I thought it was a political ambush. The Mayor has said that the events in question have a parallel with the Boris Johnson forcing out of Ian Blair in 2008. Well, not really, but I accept the Mayor did give Cressida Dick more chances than Boris Johnson gave Ian Blair. But then what he did with Ian Blair was not sustainable either. The Mayor did not go above and beyond due process in terms of Cressida Dick. But I've said in paragraph 210 on page 62 that I accept that the Mayor had not completely closed his mind to the possibility of the Commissioner remaining in post, at least in the short term, if she made changes to the plan. The Mayor has said that the plan was unsatisfactory, and he's entitled to take that view. Of course he is. But the feedback that the Met got on the plan until the 10th of February was it was good on communications, but it was too long. But I've seen no evidence as to, other than it's too long. Yeah. The Mayor has implied that the plan wasn't, I think if I've understood him correctly, detailed enough. But on the other hand, his staff were saying it was too long. So I can't reconcile those things. Can I
just cut in on you there? And I do apologise. But what I'm trying to get to really is in your opinion and all the evidence that you've seen from both sides, do you think that the actions of the Mayor and his staff on the 10th of February in any way followed due process?
No. I think that I have said in my report that I thought that there was no proper justification for how these things were handled. I say in paragraph 214 that the conduct in question was oppressive and unreasonable. In paragraph 213 I say it was brutal. I talk in 201 about an ambush. In paragraph 74, 78, 146 and 195 I talk of threats, improper behaviour, a pretext to the removal, below the standards of a public office holder, scapegoating the Commissioner and the Charing Cross officers, short-circuiting the process, undermining the Commissioner, threatening the stability of the Met, an arbitrary timetable, preempting the statutory procedure, contrary to law and unfair, amounting to constructive dismissal and abuse of power. So the answer to your question is no, I don't think it was good.
Thank you. One final question, Mr. Mayor, for you. Well, hopefully one final question, maybe more. In relation to the questions that you were asked by my colleague, Assemblymember Garrett, in relation to the 14 officers, and I won't go into the arguments as to whether or not you asked the Commissioner to dismiss them or not. You've made it quite clear publicly you were unhappy with the behaviour of the 14 officers. That was in and that's fine. But my question is, you tried to, you yourself have admitted that you asked the Commissioner to take legal advice as to what other options were available, because you weren't quite happy with the outcome of the IOPC report, and that's fine. I think there will be quite a few Londoners who agree with you. But my question to you, Mr. Mayor, is why did you not seek legal advice on this?
So let me deal with this point, because an impression has been given by you and by Senator Garrett and by Sir Tom that only 2 officers did anything wrong in those Charing Cross.
No, forgive me, neither of them have said that, Mr. Mayor.
Let me be quite clear that it goes to the point that Caroline Russell very deftly raised of the difference between an anti-racist organisation and one that quote-unquote has zero tolerance towards racism. I think if you're a police officer, you cannot be a passive bystander when a fellow officer is being overtly racist, sexist, misogynistic, discriminatory. And Sir Mark has made that quite clear about the duties upon his officer since he's taken over as Commissioner. So to answer your question, I do think that those 14 officers should have done something in relation to the WhatsApp messages, those who weren't sending the messages. I also think that sometimes people make mistakes. The IOPC could have made a mistake, but the Commissioner took at face value what the IOPC had said, which does nothing to either address the issue of whether any officers could face disciplinary actions or to address the issues, the cultural issues, the systemic issues that we know exist.
The question, Mr. Mayor, is because you were unhappy with the Commissioner not being prepared to take any further legal advice, and you have every right to have that position.
She could have come back a week later and said, I am.
But why did you not seek legal advice? Why have you not, even subsequently, gone to seek legal advice? And nothing to stop you, Mr. Mayor. If you're unhappy with what the IPC did, if you don't think that the Commissioner performed to the maximum that she could have done, if you think some of those officers still have questions to ask, why have you not, you're the Mayor of London, why have you not sought any legal advice or advice from barristers as to what options are open to you, Mr. Mayor, as the de facto Commissioner for Police in London?
Well, the fact is, that meeting on the 10th of February didn't take place. The Commissioner may well have come back, as she has in the past, and said
but she didn't, Mr. Mayor. So the option is still open to you, but the option is still open to you even today.
Okay.
The option is open to you to take legal advice. So will you today, or Mr. Mayor, or after this meeting, take that legal advice that you were pressing her to take? Or if not, why not?
Well, no, the point was the Commissioner showing Londoners she takes these issues seriously in relation to the systemic cultural issues and in relation to trust and confidence, firstly. Secondly, in relation to whether any officers who should have been disciplined weren't disciplined. As things transpired, things moved on very quickly. The Commissioner didn't come to that meeting on the 10th of February. By the way, she may have come to that meeting and said, you know what, on reflection, I should probably just kick the ties and check that is the case and come forward with a comprehensive plan. What happened on the 10th of February is when she decided to resign, things moved on in relation to other things that we had to do. I didn't ask the acting Commissioner to get legal advice. Things have moved on. What you're seeing with Sir Mark is a proportional response to the challenges we're facing.
I've got to bring this back to this particular report. Have you finished, Assembly Member Prince? We've got Assembly Member Sahota. Can you keep it very brief? Apologies, Assembly Member Sahota, and keep it to this report, please.
I will certainly keep it, Chair, to the proceedings of this committee, yes. Sir Tom, this is no doubt that the Mayor was losing confidence in the Commissioner. The public have certainly lost confidence in the Metropolitan Police. It's the lowest at the SAB has been. And you said earlier on here in this meeting that I have no doubt that the Metropolitan Police took seriously the concerns of the Mayor. Was it your terms of reference to make that assessment?
I don't say that in my report, but I was asked that question.
I'm referring to this meeting. You said it here in this meeting.
Yes, in this meeting. Yes. Why do I think that they take it seriously?
Was it terms of reference to make the assessment?
No.
Okay, but you made an assessment. So how do you make the assessment?
Well, I was asked this question today, so I'm trying to help. But I was asked, does the Met take it seriously? Well, I've been working with the Metropolitan Police intensively for almost 10 years as Chief Inspector of Constabulary. So I know the Met very well indeed. And I know that they take the misconduct of officers and the cases where either systemic or individual misconduct, homophobia, misogyny, all
Who
these
did you
other
look in
things.
the eye to ask this question? Who did you look in the eye to ask the question, how do you take the confidence of the Metropolitan Police? Who did you ask that question to make an assessment?
I'm making this assessment on the basis of 10 years with the Met.
But you didn't ask any specifically on the issues about, did you ask Cressida Dick this question?
In this investigation?
Yes.
No.
You didn't. Okay. So
Because it's not in my terms of
this
reference.
is something you made on a basis of your historical job 10 years ago as a commissioner. That's something you made as a assumption. But you didn't look anyone in the eye to ask this question.
I'm not talking about making an assessment 10 years ago. The point I've made is I was 10 years as Chief Inspector of Constabulary. I only finished 6 months ago.
Okay.
I know the Met very well. I know their attitude to this kind of misconduct, and that's the question that I was asked. But no, it's not in my terms of reference.
And Mr. Mayor,
during Sir Tom's time as Chief Inspector, the abduction, rape and murder of Sir Everard, the police and the vigil at Clapham Common in the consultation with the local women's groups, the advice given to wave down a bus approved by the Commissioner,
Mr. Mayor.
derogatory comments...
I'm interested in the answer.
Really?
Derogatory comments made by serving officers
Yeah.
and photographing
Are you running down the
two
clock, Mr.
dead
Mayor?
women, Nicole Smallman and Bieber Henry. The report into Morgan, Dame Cressida withholding evidence from that inquiry. The inquest into the victims of Stephen Port. I'm not sure if Chief Inspector Sir Tom did meet the family of Anthony Walgate, the family of Gabriel Cavari,
Can
the
you
family
not-
of Daniel Whitworth.
Can we
the
just
family
have
of
straight
I
answers
just
to
want one more
questions
question.
on
Bianca
this,
Williams.
please?
I'm sure Sir Tom's met Bianca
I just
Williams.
want to
Mr.
get
Mayor.
one
I want to get
in
one
relation
more
to the
question.
treatment she received.
I just want to
I'm sure
get
he's
one-
met Charles Q.
Mr. Mayor,
in relation to the
I
treatment
just want
she
to get one more
received.
question to Sir Tom before time is around. Sir Tom, you said in your own words here that this mayor was much more generous to Cressida Dick than Boris Johnson was to Ian Blair. Why was there no commission or investigation held at that time by that Secretary of State? Was it because of the Tory Secretary of State looking after a Tory mayor?
Well, I wasn't Chief Inspector of Constabulary in 2008.
But there wasn't any inquiry to held in Blair.
I have no idea why there was no
But there was no
inquiry.
inquiry held into the matter.
Correct.
Thank you.
It was
Right.
2008. yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I wasn't Chief Inspector then. The Mayor gives a
No.
long list of things that have happened on my watch. I make the point, they happened on his watch too.
Yeah. Okay.
I make the
And
point
you
after he
did.
ceased
And
being
just
Chief
to-
Inspector, Andy Cook did.
And
put the Met
can I
Police
just
Service
say,
in
I
special
think,
measures and working closely
I
with this new
think,
Chief
Mr.
Inspector,
Mayor,
making
your
sure the Met Police
attitude
Service
towards Sir
addresses
Tom
these
has been
issues.
quite appalling. Even Sir Tom's report, even this, it's totally unbecoming of a mayor, let me tell you. Assembly Member Pidgeon, you've got just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up the point about you hadn't prejudged what was going to happen at that meeting, Mr. Mayor. Your office, Mayor's Office of Police and Crime, were working up. They were looking at the reasons to put in a letter to HMI to start the process for removing the Commissioner. What were those reasons? What did you ask them to include in that?
I didn't see that piece of work or any reasons.
But they were working it up. You're aware they were working
No.
it up? Because 2 weeks ago it says...
Subsequently, I was aware that MOPAC were doing this piece of work. At the time, I wasn't aware.
So you weren't aware, so you hadn't asked them to, because that might have been something you would have wanted to come out of the meeting on the 10th. If it hadn't gone well and you weren't happy, you would have invoked the process.
I would, for the ones out, I was aware there was a statutory process.
Yes.
I was hoping we wouldn't need that, but I was quite clear in relation to the meeting with Dame Cressida Dick on the 10th of February. It was an opportunity for her, as she'd done in the past, to come and meet with me and to discuss a way forward. Many examples in the past we've agreed a way forward. The action plan, police and Extinction Rebellion, Clapham Common, use of tasers. We disagreed initially. She persuaded me that her view was the right one. The size that the Met Police Service should be originally, if you remember, she refused to say what figure is the right figure for police officers to have. She changed her view in relation to that the use of police community support officers. Again, I couldn't persuade her in her views on that. So there have been occasions in the past where we've managed to reach a way forward. On this occasion, she didn't even bother to turn up. And she didn't build upon the plan she sent me on the Friday.
I appreciate.
And even Sir Tom thinks she was wrong in that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And the discussion today has been about the process. You may have the right outcome. Many of us may think that, but actually, it's about you hadn't done it in the right
here's
way,
the point.
and that's the discussion
and this is
we've
what
had
Sir Thomas
today.
got so wrong.
Felt like
the process
catch-up.
was never invoked, and so that's, the statutory process was never invoked. And if Sir Tom is right, and it is a thesis, it's not accurate by the law. That means there's never a case. There can never be a case where a mayor loses confidence with his or her commissioner short of invoking the statutory process. My point is you lose the confidence, if that happens hypothetically, and then you invoke the statutory process. If it's the case, it's an abusive process, losing confidence, you can never invoke the statutory process.
And there's real politic, and I get that, and that was the evidence I and others gave to Sir Tom Winsor. Of course there is, but equally, it seems to me that there's lots of questions around the setup of police and crime commissioners, and we'll look at how we look recommendations for the future on that, which is the second part. Thank you, Chair.
I think we certainly will. There aren't any more times for questions.
Can I just get a point of clarification in?
Well, if it's one,
It's
literally 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, okay, less than that.
No, that's all you've got.
Sir Tom, can I take you back to something you said at the start? You mentioned that the former commissioner invited you for dinner at the end of your term as chief inspector. When was this?
I think it was in the last month of my term of office.
Your office, you stepped down in July. Sorry, in March, 31st of March.
I left on the 31st of March. I can't remember exactly when.
And when were you asked by the, you were asked by the Home Secretary to do this report?
25th, I think
This
it was.
was 25th of March. So it was around about the same time?
No, it was before that.
Before you were asked to do
the dinner with Cressida Dick was before my appointment to do this work.
Okay, will you write to us, Sir Tom, and clarify
that's my answer.
There you go.
I don't need to clarify it. It's perfectly clear.
All right, okay. Thank you, Assemblymember Desai. There are loads more questions I'm sure my colleagues and I would like to put to you. One of the things that anybody reading this would look at the pressure under the from the 2nd of February really through to the 10th was quite intense, and I would ask anybody to look at that. Before we finish, and we're not going to have time for the third section, Mr. Mayor, can you tell me, did you, aside from the severance package, did you have any other private payment out to the Commissioner or the past Commissioner? Was there any other monies paid to her beyond that?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Not that you're aware of? So you can't confirm that?
I can write you if that helps.
Yes, we would like to know, please. Sir Tom Winsor, is there anything you'd like to add to the meeting of anything that's said?
I think we could go on all afternoon.
Yes.
I think that we have scratched the surface of some of the issues in the report, but, you know, a 3-hour session to deal with an investigation that took 22 weeks is never going to get through everything. And, of course, there's part 2 of the report, which is the forward-looking process. But if I'm invited by the committee to come back and do this all again, I'm more than happy.
Thank you. I think we'll be taking you up on that. Mr. Mayor, have you anything left to say? No. Okay, well, I'd like to thank both our guests for attending the meeting today. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Thank you. Can we also delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Agreed. Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the work programme for the 22-23 Assembly year and note the monthly report from the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime? Right, the next meeting of the committee is scheduled for Wednesday, 30th November 2022 at 10 a.m. in the Chamber, City Hall. I do have other business, and I'm to read this out. Having listened to the evidence provided at the meeting today, in accordance with Section 100B 4B of the Local Government Act 1972, I'm admitting to the agenda an urgent item of business to consider summonsing documents from the Mayor of London in his capacity as the occupant of the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, in order that the committee can investigate further matters surrounding the resignation of the former Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick, DBEQPM, and in order to ensure that the committee receives these documents as early as possible. Can I ask the committee to agree the following recommendations? That the committee, under provisions of section 33(5) of the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011, requires Sadiq Khan, in his capacity as occupant of the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, to provide the committee with the documents listed below, for which notice will be given in due course in accordance with section 62 of the Greater London Authority Act 1999, as amended, as per section 33(9) of the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011, and with the documents to be provided no later than 2 weeks from the date of the notice requiring these documents. So they are letter from the Mayor's legal advisers sent to Tom Winsor on the 18th of August 2022, as referred to at page 8, paragraph 16 of the Winsor report. Legal submissions from leading and junior counsel on behalf of MOPAC sent to Sir Tom Winsor on the 20th of August 2022, as referred at page 8, paragraph 17 of the Winsor report. Correspondence between the Mayor and the Home Secretary in September 2021, confirming the extension to the Commissioner's appointment for a further 2 years, as referred to on page 13, paragraph 29 of the Winsor report. Letter from the Mayor to the Home Secretary dated 6th of September 2021, as referred to at page 13, paragraph 30 of the Winsor report. Draft of the IOPC report that was sent to MOPAC in September 2021, as referred to in pages 20 and 21, paragraph 62, footnote 11 of the Winsor report. Draft case prepared by MOPAC for the Mayor to the Chief Inspector of Constabulary for the removal of the Commissioner, as referred to at page 43, paragraph 147 of the Winsor report. Minutes and notes produced by the Met and the Mayor's Chief of Staff of the meeting that took place between the Commissioner and the Mayor on the 2nd of February 2022, as referred to at pages 22-24, paragraphs 68 and 74 of the Winsor report, and documents setting out the total costs of legal advice provided to MOPAC, the Mayor and his team on this matter. I have no other business, so I declare this meeting. Oh, hang on.
Can you ask the committee to agree?
Oh, yes, you've got to agree all of that. Were you taking notes? Okay, thank you very much. No other, nothing else to talk about, so thank you very much. End of the meeting.